Welcome, friend, to this shared journey. Tonight, we will delve into the gentle yet profound secrets of the Zen masters, the ancient keys they forged not just to quiet the restless mind, but to unlock a profound and unshakable clarity within. As we settle in, feel free to share the time and place you are listening from. I am prepared to share with you a collection of rare and exceptionally gentle Zen stories. Each narrative carries a crucial, often overlooked truth concerning how to release the mind from its self-made prisons, those limiting walls built of chronic anxiety, ceaseless overthinking, and persistent dissatisfaction. Understand that these are far more than simple tales intended just for the evening's entertainment. They function as direct transmissions of insight, powerful echoes emanating from enlightened minds who discovered one fundamental, universal secret. That secret is this: true rest is not a distant destination you strive to arrive at, but an inherent path you must gently uncover within your own experience. The great Zen master Dogen articulated this perfectly when he taught, "To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things." Tonight, through these ancient stories, we will explore the practical methods that help us softly forget that burdensome self, the self that ceaselessly worries, judges, and strives. As these timeless narratives unfold, you may perceive a gentle but palpable shift inside your being. The chaotic noise of the day will naturally begin to fade, and the emotional weight you've been unknowingly carrying will feel distinctly lighter. You will be guided toward reclaiming your natural, inherent state of deep awareness and peaceful rest. So, allow yourself to fully settle in this moment. Consciously let go of the demands and occurrences of the day. Take a slow, intentional deep breath, and as you exhale completely, gently open your mind to receive the profound wisdom that has traveled across ages specifically to find you, right here, in this very present moment. Let us commence our journey with a powerful story concerning compassion and the unsustainable burden we frequently place upon ourselves. This tale is known as the weight of the world. In a peaceful monastery, gracefully nestled among rolling green hills, lived a young monk named Kenji. He approached his life with deep sincerity and maintained an extraordinarily open heart. Every morning, he would rise long before dawn for meditation, and every evening, he would walk the monastery grounds immersed in quiet contemplation. His unwavering dedication to practice was immediately evident to everyone who encountered him. Yet, despite his commitment, something troubled his spirit deeply. Each day, whenever Kenji read the news from the outside world or heard travelers recounting distant suffering, his heart would grow demonstrably heavier. Wars raged in foreign lands. Children suffered hunger in nearby villages. Sickness relentlessly spread through communities, and cruelty seemed to flourish wherever he turned his gaze. The collective weight of all this suffering pressed down upon him like a crushing mountain, making it agonizingly difficult even to breathe, much less find the profound peace that his dedicated practice promised. One morning, completely unable to bear the spiritual burden any longer, Kenji approached his master, Rashi Tanaka, who was meticulously tending the small monastery garden. The elderly teacher moved slowly and deliberately among the vegetables, pulling weeds with careful, focused attention, his weathered hands gentle and respectful toward each individual plant. "Master," Kenji began, his voice thick and heavy with anguish, "I feel the suffering of all beings pressing down unrelentingly upon my heart. I constantly see the wars, the hunger, the sickness, and the endless, senseless cruelty that humans inflict upon each other. This immense weight is literally crushing me. How is it possible for me to find inner peace when the world is clearly drowning in such widespread turmoil? How can I justify sitting peacefully in meditation when countless others are in such agony?" Master Tanaka looked up from his radishes, his eyes conveying deep kindness yet remaining keenly piercing. Without uttering a word, he gestured toward a large, smooth river stone that rested at the edge of the garden path. The stone possessed a beautiful, understated simplicity, worn impeccably smooth by countless years of flowing water and relentless weather, yet it was conspicuously heavy. "Pick it up," the master quietly instructed. Although intensely puzzled by the request, Kenji immediately obeyed. He bent down and, with considerable visible effort, managed to lift the stone. It proved to be even more dense and heavier than he had first estimated, and his muscles immediately strained under its unexpected mass. His back began to ache almost instantly. "Now," said Master Tanaka, calmly returning to the task of weeding, "carry it with you for the rest of this long day. You must not put it down at any time. Take it to meditation, carry it during your meals, bring it to your chores, and keep it with you even during rest. Let this stone be your unwavering, constant companion." Kenji complied with the instruction, though he deeply questioned the master's true purpose. He carried the massive stone everywhere he went throughout that extended day. During the stillness of morning meditation, his arms visibly trembled with the exhaustive effort required to hold it aloft. During meals, he found it nearly impossible to eat properly with the stone awkwardly placed in his lap. While attempting to sweep the temple floors, his movements were clumsy, slow, and horribly awkward. By the afternoon, his shoulders were screaming in debilitating pain. By evening, his entire body was throbbing, and deep exhaustion overwhelmed his spirit and physical strength. As the sun finally set, Kenji stumbled back toward his master, his face ghostly pale with fatigue, sweat beading heavily on his forehead despite the cooling evening air. "Master," he gasped, barely able to force the words out, "I simply cannot carry this weight any longer. This stone is utterly breaking my body and destroying my spirit. I feel as though I might instantly collapse." Master Tanaka looked at his student with infinite compassion, his eyes soft, warm, and entirely understanding. "Then put it down," he said gently. Kenji immediately let the stone drop to the earth with a heavy, resonating thud that seemed to echo through the quiet garden space. Instantaneously, a massive wave of profound relief washed completely over him. His shoulders visibly dropped, his breathing deepened fully, and he felt an incredible lightness, as though he could float away. The sheer absence of that crushing weight was, in itself, an overwhelming source of joy. Master Tanaka carefully set down his gardening tools and faced his student directly. "The collective suffering of the world is exactly like that stone," he said softly. "It is undeniably real, and it is immensely heavy. Your compassion for it is a beautiful and absolutely necessary thing. Never diminish or lose that quality. But you, Kenji, are not meant to carry the stone of all suffering upon your own shoulders. You are meant to perceive it clearly, to understand its true weight, to feel its reality deeply in your heart, and then, crucially, to put it down so that your hands are free to help where your efforts are genuinely capable." The Buddha once famously stated, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." This ancient, illuminating wisdom unveils a profound truth concerning the essential nature of compassion and meaningful service. When we insist on carrying the crushing weight of all global suffering within our hearts, we become internally too burdened, exhausted, and paralyzed to be of any genuine, skillful help to anyone. Why, then, do we so readily pick up these stones that are fundamentally not ours to carry? Zen Buddhism identifies several counterproductive patterns within our conditioned minds that actively create this unnecessary suffering. First is what we can term empathic overwhelm, the innate tendency to unconsciously absorb the pain and distress surrounding us until we become completely paralyzed by its sheer magnitude. Second is the subtle, insidious desire of the ego to be the singular savior, the one who fixes everything. This is a subtle form of spiritual pride that mistakenly believes we ought to possess the power to heal all wounds and resolve all conflicts. Third is our fundamental difficulty in distinguishing clearly between healthy, active concern and destructive, paralyzing worry, the vital difference between pure compassion and draining co-suffering. True compassion, the kind that translates into effective action, requires what Zen practice terms emotional non-attachment. This is not a call to become cold, distant, or uncaring. Rather, it means cultivating the capacity to feel deeply without being entirely consumed by emotion, allowing us to respond skillfully rather than being paralyzed by overwhelm. Much like a skilled doctor who can competently treat a patient's wounds without personally taking on their physical pain, we must learn to serve the world from a place of clear seeing and detached awareness, rather than from emotional fusion. Consider your own daily life. How frequently do you scroll through endless news feeds, absorbing story after story of tragedy and injustice until you feel utterly helpless, heavy, and spiritually depleted? How often do you find yourself taking on the intense emotional burdens of family members, close friends, or even strangers, carrying their psychological pain as if it were inherently your own responsibility? Each time we engage in this absorption, we pick up another stone. And the more stones we insist on carrying, the exponentially less capable we become of taking effective, meaningful action. The revered Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi taught in Beautiful Paradox, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This gentle wisdom applies perfectly to how we relate to suffering. We are inherently complete, yet we can grow in the practical wisdom of how to help others skillfully. The required improvement lies not in increasing the number of stones we carry, but in learning the precise wisdom of when to compassionately pick them up and, crucially, when to resolutely set them back down. The practice of compassionate non-attachment begins with recognizing the fundamental difference between a clear, intentional response and an unconscious, emotional reaction. When we merely react to suffering, we frequently absorb it, thus multiplying the internal pain without actually creating external solutions. When we learn to respond, we maintain the necessary clarity and emotional balance required to take truly helpful action. This response might manifest as donating thoughtfully to causes we care about, volunteering our unique time and skills, or simply offering a genuine, kind word to someone experiencing immediate need. The Buddha wisely taught, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared." When we vigilantly maintain our own inner light rather than dimming it and depleting ourselves by carrying unnecessary stones, we naturally become enduring sources of illumination for others. Our maintained peace becomes a profound gift to a troubled world. Our clarity becomes a reliable beacon for those lost in confusion. Tonight, as you become consciously aware of the various stones you might currently be carrying, worries about global events you fundamentally cannot control, emotional burdens that rightfully belong to others, or the paralyzing weight of trying to fix problems that are not yours to mend, can you genuinely feel the immense relief that floods your system when you decide to set them down? Can you clearly distinguish between healthy caring and destructive carrying, between pure compassion and exhausting co-suffering? As the Buddha taught, your essential life work is to discover your unique work, and then, with all the dedication of your heart, to fully give yourself to that specific endeavor. When we finally stop carrying stones that are definitively not ours, we immediately free ourselves to pick up the tools that are meant for our hands, enabling us to serve the world effectively from a place of sustainable strength rather than debilitating depletion. As we continue our deepening journey through the resonant wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us now turn our attention to a powerful tale about recognition and the true, intrinsic nature of worth. This story is titled The Stone Mind. A young, eager monk named Hogan had traveled a tremendous distance from his distant homeland, crossing vast mountains and powerful rivers, all to reach the renowned monastery in China where the great Master Joshu imparted his teachings. Hogan had been captivated by stories of this master's legendary wisdom, how dedicated students flocked from across the known world to learn from his guidance, and how even a single, well-placed word from Joshu was rumored to spark enlightenment in a heart that was truly prepared. Upon his arrival at the revered monastery, Hogan threw himself into the strict daily routine with tremendous, zealous enthusiasm. He rose before dawn for strenuous meditation, worked diligently and tirelessly in the gardens and kitchens, studied the ancient texts with passionate, focused attention, and often stayed up late into the night contemplating the profound Dharma talks he had received. Day after day, week after week, he rigidly maintained this intense practice, waiting with mounting eagerness for some definitive sign of acknowledgement or recognition from the great master. But months slowly passed, and Master Joshu seemed to pay him absolutely no mind. During the group teachings, the master's penetrating gaze would consistently pass over Hogan as if he were entirely invisible. When Hogan occasionally posed questions during Dharma discussions, Joshu would respond minimally and move swiftly on to engage other students. There were never any private interviews, no special, personalized instructions, and no tangible acknowledgement of his dedication or significant progress. Meanwhile, other students, some of whom had arrived long after Hogan, seemed to receive far more of the master's attention, detailed guidance, and precious, limited time. As the seasons revolved, Hogan's initial fiery enthusiasm began to dangerously transform into bitter frustration and corrosive self-doubt. He observed the master spending long, intimate conversations with certain favored disciples, offering detailed, tailored guidance to others, and even sharing exclusive meals with a select few. Hogan, conversely, felt increasingly irrelevant and invisible, as though his entire presence added absolutely nothing essential to the monastery community. His racing mind began generating elaborate, painful stories regarding his inherent unworthiness. Perhaps he wasn't intellectually sharp enough to grasp Joshu's subtle teachings. Perhaps his extensive previous training had been woefully inadequate. Perhaps he simply lacked some essential, innate spiritual quality that the other students possessed effortlessly. The more intensely he observed and compared himself to others, the more profoundly inadequate and insignificant he felt. Finally, reaching a point where he could no longer bear the acute feeling of insignificance, Hogan approached Master Joshu in the garden where the old teacher was sitting quietly, completely immersed among the morning flowers. The master's presence was as profoundly serene as always, his full attention focused completely on the simple, fundamental act of breathing. "Master," Hogan began, his voice thick with the combined weight of disappointment and wounded pride. "I have diligently been here for many long months, practicing the path with complete, exhaustive dedication. I have sincerely attempted to be a model student, to follow the way faithfully. Yet, you have offered me no personal guidance, no special attention, and absolutely no recognition for my tireless efforts. I feel like nothing more than a forgotten, worthless stone lying anonymously in this monastery courtyard. Since I am clearly perceived as being of no value here, I have regretfully decided to leave and seek instruction elsewhere." Master Joshu looked up slowly, his ancient eyes twinkling momentarily with what might have been gentle amusement. He gazed steadily at Hogan for a protracted moment, then deliberately gestured around the courtyard where they were sitting. Smooth, substantial stones of various sizes were arranged in careful, functional patterns, creating stable pathways, neat borders, supporting structures, and forming the unshakable foundation for the garden walls. "You say you are a worthless stone," Joshu replied calmly, maintaining an even tone. "Tell me, do you notice these other numerous stones here in the courtyard?" "Yes, Master," Hogan answered, wondering intently where the master's cryptic line of questioning was leading. "Do you sit on them when you wish to rest?" the master inquired. "No, master," Hogan replied, slightly confused. "Do you haphazardly move them around when their position happens to displease you? Do you kick them away when you are frustrated? Do you demand that they fundamentally change their essential shape or color merely to suit your transient preferences?" "No, master, of course not," Hogan affirmed, beginning to sense profoundly that a vital truth was being revealed, even though he could not yet articulate exactly what it was. Master Joshu smiled gently, his weathered face creasing with deep compassion. "Look even more carefully at these stones. This entire sacred monastery structure rests physically and functionally upon them. They ask for absolutely nothing in return. No praise, no acknowledgement, no special attention or reward. They are not publicly praised for their tireless service. Yet they support everything essential here. The meditation hall stands firm because of them. The kitchen functions reliably because of them. The garden paths exist safely because of their stability. Without these humble, unmoving stones, this entire sacred space would instantly crumble into ruin." He paused deliberately, allowing his potent words to settle fully into Hogan's awareness, much like fertile seeds finding rich, welcoming ground. "You claimed you are a stone," Joshu continued gently. "If you genuinely understood the true profound meaning of being a stone, to support without anxiously seeking credit, to serve profoundly without demanding explicit recognition, to exist with such fundamental, unshakable stability that others can confidently build their spiritual practice upon your dependable presence, you would already be fully enlightened." In that instantaneous moment, Hogan's constricted mind cracked open, much like an eggshell breaking away. He suddenly and clearly saw how his relentless seeking for attention, his urgent need for external validation, and his ego's desperate desire to be somehow special, had been the precise obstacles preventing him from recognizing the inherent truth of what he already was. Just like the steadfast stones beneath his feet, he realized he had been faithfully supporting the monastery community all along through his sincere, unassuming practice, his quiet, stable presence, and his simple, profound dedication to the path itself. The Buddha's lasting wisdom reminds us that three things cannot long remain hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. The deeper teaching embedded here reveals that our essential, intrinsic worth is never dependent on external recognition, lavish praise, or special, favorable treatment. Like the silent, foundational stones supporting the entire monastery, our deepest value lies not in the act of being noticed or singled out, but in our fundamental, stable capacity to support and skillfully sustain what is truly essential. Why do human beings struggle so intensely and persistently with this profound need for external recognition? Zen Buddhism identifies several deep layers of psychological conditioning that actively construct this painful pattern. First is what we aptly call ego hunger, the persistent sense of a separate self that must constantly seek confirmation of its existence and paramount importance through external validation. This ego hunger is inherently insatiable because it is built upon the illusion that we are isolated, separate beings fiercely competing for limited attention and finite approval. Second is our pervasive cultural conditioning surrounding achievement and the desire for specialness. From early childhood, we are meticulously taught to measure our inherent worth using external metrics like perfect grades, public awards, specific praise, and comparative success. This conditioning runs so deeply that we often unconsciously transfer it into our spiritual practice, viewing enlightenment itself as merely another grand form of achievement rather than recognizing it as our natural, fundamental state. Third is our chronic difficulty distinguishing between healthy, grounded humility and what Zen masters refer to as spiritual materialism, the subtle, sophisticated ways we manage to turn even the most profound practices into opportunities for ego enhancement. We desire desperately to be seen as exceptional meditators, devoted students, or already awakened beings. In doing so, we completely miss the core paradox. That true awakening necessarily includes the dissolution of the very self, the ego, that seeks to be awakened. Consider your own daily experience. How frequently do you find yourself subtly seeking recognition at work, internally demanding that your efforts be appreciated by family members, or anxiously hoping for explicit acknowledgement of your significant contributions to community projects? Notice the subtle, sharp tension that inevitably arises when others receive praise that you internally feel you deserved, or when your diligent hard work goes completely unnoticed while someone else swiftly receives the credit. This demanding, seeking mind creates endless psychological suffering because it places your vital sense of inner peace and self-worth entirely at the mercy of other people's transient attention and approval. Like Hogan in the story, we can waste tremendous spiritual and physical energy striving desperately to be noticed, all the while completely missing the profound, intrinsic value of what we already offer simply by maintaining an authentic, sincere, and stable presence. Zen teacher Dogen encapsulated this wisdom when he wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self." This deliberate forgetting does not imply becoming passive, inert, or ceasing to care profoundly about our actions. Instead, it means completely releasing our tenacious attachment to being perceived as special or different, thus allowing us to serve the world from a place of natural, inherent fullness rather than striving from ego-driven emptiness. The stone mind represents what Buddhism calls shoshin, or beginner's mind, the radical willingness to be completely ordinary, to serve diligently without fanfare or theatrical displays, and to exist with such fundamental stability that others can confidently rely upon the unwavering strength of our presence. This mindset does not require diminishing our inherent worth or hiding our unique gifts. Rather, it means offering those gifts freely and fully, without any attachment to how they are received, judged, or acknowledged by the world. In highly practical terms, cultivating the stone mind means actively practicing what Zen refers to as just sitting, shikantaza, in all aspects of daily life. When we engage in work, we simply work fully, diligently, and completely without seeking applause. When we listen to friends, we listen wholeheartedly, without any need to be perceived as exceptional listeners. When we meditate, we just meditate, without anxiously grasping for fleeting special experiences or profound insights. Tonight, as you internally consider the various subtle ways you might still be seeking recognition or feeling painfully overlooked, can you truly sense the immense, liberating relief that comes from releasing the need to be special? Can you feel the natural, quiet dignity that emerges when you stop performing for external approval and instead offer your essential gifts freely, consistently, and dependably, like the stones supporting a sacred temple? As the Buddha profoundly taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. The most profound, enduring teachings often emanate not from those who desperately seek the spotlight, but from those who, like the foundation stones, support the whole community with quiet, profound strength and an unshakable, humble presence. Let us now shift our exploration to a deeply insightful story concerning identity and the complex masks we instinctively wear in our various social roles. This narrative is called The Governor's Visit. In the ancient, cultured capital of Kyoto, where vibrant cherry blossoms lined the tranquil rivers and traditional temples stood in stark juxtaposition alongside busy market streets, there lived a man who held one of the absolute highest governing positions in the land. Governor Nakamura carried the weighty responsibility for the welfare of thousands of citizens, the meticulous implementation of imperial policies, and the rigorous maintenance of peace throughout his vast province. His rigorous days were ceaselessly filled with formal ceremonies, weighty political decisions, and obligatory meetings with other officials who invariably addressed him using elaborate, formal titles and performed deep, respectful bows. The gravity of his powerful position served as both a coveted privilege and an exhausting burden. Every morning, skilled servants dressed him in the finest, heavy silk robes, painstakingly tailored to befitting his high rank. Every interaction he had was filtered through suffocating layers of complex protocol and careful political consideration. Every single word he spoke had to be meticulously measured for its potential impact on his reputation and professional effectiveness. He was universally known by titles like Your Excellency, Honorable Governor, and Lord Nakamura, lofty titles that simultaneously elevated him above the populace while tragically isolating him from simple, genuine human connection. Despite achieving such immense worldly success, Governor Nakamura felt an undeniable, growing emptiness within his heart. The strictly formal interactions, the necessity of constant performance of authority, and the emotional distance his high position mandated left him yearning desperately for something substantially more authentic and real. He had previously heard inspiring stories of a simple Zen master named Kaiyu, whose wisdom was said to possess the sharp ability to cut cleanly through all social pretense and speak directly, unadorned, to the core human soul. After months of private contemplation, the governor finally resolved to seek out this profound teacher. On a quiet, early morning, Governor Nakamura made the journey toward Master Kaiyu's simple, unassuming hermitage situated on the outskirts of the sprawling city. He brought with him, as protocol rigidly demanded, his usual retinue of attendant officials and protective guards. His elaborate, heavy silk robes rustled ostentatiously as he walked, and his official, carved seal gleamed powerfully in the soft morning sunlight. Following stringent proper etiquette, the governor's chief attendant approached the hermitage door first to formally announce his master's arrival. The attendant knocked respectfully on the simple wooden door, and when Master Kichu appeared, the attendant immediately bowed deeply. "Honored Master," the attendant declared with formal, practiced precision, "My lord, the most excellent governor of this province, the administrator of imperial justice, and the protector of the people, has humbly come a great distance to seek your wisdom. He respectfully requests an audience with you." Master Kaiyu, a small, elderly man dressed only in simple, worn brown robes, listened attentively to this elaborate, lengthy introduction without the slightest change in his serene expression. When the attendant finally finished speaking, the master looked up calmly and replied without a moment of hesitation, "I have absolutely no business with such a person. These inflated titles mean precisely nothing to me. Tell him to immediately leave this place." The attendant's face instantly flushed crimson with confusion and profound embarrassment. Never, in all his decades of service, had anyone dared to refuse a meeting with the supreme governor. He returned quickly to where Governor Nakamura waited, his head deeply bowed in shame, and nervously reported the master's shocking words. But rather than reacting with insulted dignity or political anger, something immediately shifted within the governor's consciousness. In that sharp, public moment of rejection, he instantly recognized a profound truth. The master had not rejected him, the man, personally. Instead, he had rejected the elaborate, isolating facade of titles, protocols, and social positions that functioned only to separate human beings from authentic, genuine encounter. Governor Nakamura understood instantly and intuitively what radical action was required of him. He turned to his waiting attendants and guards, dismissing them with gentle, measured words. He proceeded to remove his ornate, heavy outer robes, leaving himself clothed only in simple, unadorned undergarments. He washed the formal cosmetics from his face and tied back his long hair in a plain, unpretentious style. Then, completely alone and utterly unadorned by rank, he approached the hermitage door once more. This time, he knocked gently on the door himself. When Master Kichu appeared, The man formerly known as Your Excellency bowed humbly and spoke in a quiet, deeply personal voice, a voice that had not been heard by others in many years. Master, he said simply, I am Dato. I have come seeking your guidance on the path to understanding. Would you be willing to speak with me? Upon hearing this humble, direct introduction, using his intimate, personal given name rather than his elaborate governmental title, Master Kayu's previously stern expression instantly transformed into a genuinely warm, welcoming smile. His eyes crinkled with evident delight, and he opened his arms wide in a gesture of sincere embrace. Ah, Dato, he exclaimed with unreserved joy. Please come in immediately. I have been truly hoping to meet you. Let us sit together and share tea while we speak of the Dharma. The transformation in the masters. The reception was total and instantaneous. Where mere moments before there had been a cold rejection of rigid, pompous formality, there was now a genuine, heartfelt welcome for authentic humanity. As the Buddha observed, however many holy words you read, however many you speak, what good will they do you if you do not act upon them? This story yields a profound teaching. The crucial difference between our essential, unchanging nature and the temporary roles we assume in the world. Why do we become so deeply identified with our social roles and titles that we lose touch with the truth of our authentic selves? Zen Buddhism illuminates several layers of conditioning that perpetuate this pattern. First is what we might call role identification, the gradual, subtle process by which we begin to believe that we are the positions we hold, rather than simply human beings temporarily filling those positions. Over time, we can become so fully merged with our professional identities, family roles, or social status that we forget the simple person residing beneath all these accumulated layers. Second is our society's powerful emphasis on hierarchical recognition. We learn early in life that certain titles, achievements, and positions automatically command respect and attention. This cultural conditioning can become so strong that we unconsciously conclude our inherent worth as human beings is tied irrevocably to these external markers of success. We begin to introduce ourselves through our accomplishments rather than through our fundamental essence. Third is what Zen tradition terms face-saving, our deep attachment to maintaining a particular image, reputation, or public persona. The more invested we become in how others perceive our roles, the more rigid, defensive, and armored we become about maintaining those personas. We construct elaborate walls of formality and protocol that, while perhaps necessary for certain functions, ultimately isolate us from genuine human connection. Consider your own life. Notice the distinct ways you feel and behave when you are at work versus when you are at home, or versus when you are sharing time with close friends. While some degree of adaptation to context is natural and appropriate, consider where you might be concealing your true self, hiding behind professional titles, fixed social roles, or family positions, in ways that inadvertently prevent others from connecting with the person you genuinely are. This pattern shows up in surprisingly subtle ways throughout our daily interactions. We might introduce ourselves exclusively by our credentials, perhaps Dr. Smith, rather than simply Mary, prioritizing academic achievement over personhood. We might interact very differently with service workers when we are dressed professionally versus when we are dressed casually. We might even find ourselves speaking with an altered tone when we are in positions of authority compared to when we are asking someone else for help. The teaching here isn't that social roles are inherently problematic or that we should abandon necessary structure. Governments need governors, hospitals need doctors, and families need parents. Rather, the teaching encourages maintaining constant awareness of the distinction between the temporary functions we fulfill and our enduring, fundamental humanity. Master Kayu was not rejecting governance or suggesting that social organization is worthless. He was pointing to the spiritual danger of becoming so identified with external roles that we lose access to the wellspring of our authentic selves. Zen teacher Alan Watts once wrote, "We are living in a culture entirely hypnotized by the illusion of time. We should perhaps also recognize that we are equally captivated by the illusion of fixed identity. We mistakenly believe we are our job titles, our relationship roles, or our social positions, when in reality these are merely temporary costumes we wear while participating in the human drama." The practice of what we might call essential meeting involves learning to recognize and connect with the fundamental personhood in ourselves and others, regardless of the specific roles and titles present in the interaction. This does not mean ignoring appropriate social protocols or abandoning professional boundaries. Instead, it means maintaining awareness of the complete human being who exists both within and beyond these temporary structures. When Governor Nakamura became simply Dato, he didn't lose his governmental responsibilities or his capacity to serve his province effectively. He didn't merely retain his capacity to serve. He actually gained access to a deeper well of wisdom and genuine connection that enhanced his service, grounding it in essential humanity rather than relying solely on inherited authority. Tonight, as you reflect on the various roles and identities you carry throughout your day, can you sense the simple person who exists beneath all the titles and positions? Can you imagine what it might feel like to meet others and be met from this place of essential humanity, rather than through the rigid filters of social hierarchy? As the Buddha taught, in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The titles and positions we hold are among the things we must ultimately release. But the love and gentleness we bring to our roles, these arise from our authentic nature and remain with us always. Now let us turn to a story about the profound act of letting go and the unexpected freedom that comes through loss. This is No Water, No Moon. Sister Chiono had been practicing Zen meditation for many years at a mountain monastery where the air was thin and pure, and the deep silence was broken only by the sound of wind through the pine trees. She was known among her fellow practitioners for her sincere dedication, her disciplined daily routine, and her genuine, burning desire to awaken to truth. Each morning before dawn she would sit for meditation. Each day she would work mindfully in the monastery gardens or the kitchen. Each evening she would study the ancient texts and contemplate the Dharma talks of her teacher. Yet despite years of earnest, devoted practice, despite countless hours of seated meditation and careful attention to every aspect of monastic life, enlightenment seemed to perpetually elude her grasp. She had mastered the classic koans, memorized the essential sutras, and could discuss Buddhist philosophy with considerable sophistication. But the direct, unmistakable realization that her teachers spoke of, that sudden, profound recognition of her true nature, remained stubbornly beyond her reach. Other students in the monastery had experienced breakthrough moments. She had witnessed the joy and transformation that came over their faces when understanding dawned. She had heard their expressions of gratitude to the teacher and their descriptions of seeing reality with completely fresh eyes. Yet for Chiono, practice remained effortful, understanding remained intellectual, and the promised liberation remained a distant concept rather than a living reality. As seasons passed and the years accumulated, Chiono began to notice a subtle desperation creeping into her practice. She increased her sitting time, hoping sheer effort would force the sought-after breakthrough. She constantly analyzed her approach, wondering if she was doing something fundamentally wrong, missing some crucial instruction, or perhaps lacking some essential capacity for awakening. The harder she tried to grasp enlightenment, the more distant and unattainable it seemed to become. One evening in late autumn, after a particularly long day of intensive meditation retreat, Chiono felt utterly exhausted in both body and spirit. The monastery had provided water for the evening tea, and she had filled an old bamboo bucket from the well. The bucket itself was beautiful in its rustic simplicity, woven from bamboo strips carefully bound together with natural plant fibers. It had served the monastery community for many years, bearing countless gallons of water from the well to the kitchen. As Chiono carried the full bucket back toward the monastery buildings, she noticed how perfectly the full moon was reflected in the still water surface. The reflection was so clear and complete that she paused for a moment to fully admire its beauty, the silvery light gently dancing, offering a moving meditation on the relationship between reality, the actual moon, and its reflection, the image below. But the old bucket had reached the very end of its useful life. The bamboo strips had dried and loosened over years of continuous use, and the binding fibers had gradually weakened. As Chiono walked slowly back through the moonlit courtyard, absorbed in watching the moon's reflection shimmer in the water, the inevitable happened. Suddenly, without any warning, the bottom of the bucket completely gave way. The bamboo strips separated, the binding snapped, and the container simply disintegrated in her hands. In an instant, the water rushed out onto the stone path, splashing her robes and disappearing into the spaces between the courtyard stones. With the water gone, the moon's reflection vanished as completely as if it had never existed. In that sudden moment of complete and unexpected loss, watching the water drain away, seeing the moon's reflection vanish instantly, feeling the once solid bucket dissolve into mere pieces, something profound shifted irrevocably in Chiono's consciousness. The very enlightenment she had desperately sought through years of striving and effort revealed itself only in the act of complete relinquishment. She understood in a flash of recognition, more certain than anything she had ever known intellectually. The enlightenment she had been seeking was like the moon's reflection in water, beautiful, compelling, but ultimately a reflection of a reality that was already perfectly present. When she stopped trying to hold on to the reflection, when the container of her grasping mind finally fell apart like the old bucket, what remained was not the image of awakeness, but awake awareness itself. Standing in the moonlit courtyard with broken bamboo strips in her hands and water soaking into the earth at her feet, Chiono began to laugh. The sound echoed off the monastery walls, a sound of profound relief and joy. That night, she composed a poem to capture her realization. With this and that, I tried to hold the pail intact, but then the bottom dropped out. Where there is no water, there is no moon in the water. Ancient Buddhist wisdom tells us, you are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement. This tale beautifully unveils the central paradox at the heart of all spiritual seeking. The more fiercely we strive or grasp for awakening, the more we unintentionally reinforce the very sense of separate selfhood and striving that awakening is meant to dissolve. Why do we struggle so intensely with letting go, even when holding on demonstrably causes suffering? Zen Buddhism points to several deep patterns in our conditioned consciousness. First is what we might call attainment mind, the pervasive belief that peace, happiness, or fulfillment exists somewhere other than where we are right now. This creates endless seeking, constantly reaching toward a future, better state while tragically missing the completeness of present experience. Second is our tenacious attachment to method and technique, much like Chiono trying to keep the bucket together with this and that. We often become so focused on our spiritual practices, our meditation techniques, or our philosophical understanding that we mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. The practices then become another form of grasping rather than opportunities for release. Third is what Zen sometimes calls Buddha sickness, becoming deeply attached to the very idea of enlightenment, making it into another object to be obtained rather than recognizing it as the inherent awareness that is already seeking. We create elaborate mental constructions about what awakening should look like, how it should feel, and what abilities it might bring, and then spend years fruitlessly trying to achieve our own concepts. Consider your own experience with seeking, whether for spiritual understanding, professional success, relationship satisfaction, or personal happiness. Notice how the intensity of wanting often seems to push away what we are reaching for. For instance, the job interview often flows better when we aren't desperate for the position. Relationships flourish more naturally when we aren't frantically clinging to particular outcomes. Even simple activities like trying to remember a forgotten name work better when we stop efforting and simply allow the answer to arise naturally. This principle applies profoundly to spiritual practice. The awakening that traditions like Zen point toward is not a state to be achieved but the very awareness in which all states arise and pass away. It is not something we can grasp because it is what we already are. It is not somewhere we can go because it is where we already are. The moon's reflection in Kyono's bucket represents all the spiritual experiences, insights, and states of consciousness that we might collect during practice. These can be beautiful and meaningful, but they are reflections of reality rather than reality itself. When we mistake these reflections for the ultimate goal, we become like a person trying to catch the moon itself by grasping at its image shimmering in the water. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki famously said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." Kyono's breakthrough came not through accumulating more spiritual knowledge or developing more sophisticated techniques, but through the complete collapse of her efforts to keep the pail together. When her expert mind, with all its complex strategies, spiritual ambitions, and expectations, finally collapsed like the old container, what remained was the simple, luminous awareness that had been present the entire time. The practice suggested by the story is not to stop meditating or to abandon sincere spiritual effort, but to hold all practice lightly. We can sit in meditation without grasping for special experiences. We can study wisdom teachings without trying to collect insights like trophies. We can engage in spiritual community without compulsively comparing our progress to others. Most importantly, we can begin to notice when we are trying to keep the pail together, when we are efforting to maintain particular states of mind, forcing spiritual experiences, or desperately grasping for future attainment. In those precise moments, we can practice what Zen calls just sitting, shikantaza, simply being present without agenda, allowing whatever arises to arise and pass away naturally. Tonight, as you consider what you might be trying to grasp or achieve in your own life, can you sense the relief that might come with letting the bottom fall out? What would remain if you stopped trying to hold together your concepts about who you should be, what you should accomplish, or what your life should ideally look like? As the Buddha taught, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. True freedom comes not from getting what we want, but from releasing our attachment to wanting itself. When the water spills and the reflection disappears, what remains is the moon itself, luminous, complete, and closer than we ever imagined. Let us explore a story about the extraordinary nature of ordinary life. This is the real miracle. Master Bankei was renowned throughout Japan for his direct, uncompromising, and highly accessible approach to Zen teaching. Unlike many teachers who relied on elaborate rituals, complex philosophical discussions, or dramatic demonstrations of spiritual power, Bankei had an unparalleled gift for pointing people toward the simple truth that was already present in their immediate, everyday experience. His monastery attracted students from many different Buddhist schools, as well as curious visitors who had heard stories of his unconventional wisdom. One day, a practitioner from another Buddhist lineage came to visit Bankei's monastery. This visitor had spent years following a teacher who was famous for his supernatural abilities and miraculous powers. He had personally witnessed his master perform seemingly impossible feats, healing the sick with a touch, manifesting objects from empty air, and demonstrating psychic abilities that utterly defied ordinary understanding. These experiences had filled the visitor with tremendous reverence for the spiritual path and unwavering confidence in his teacher's realization. During the evening Dharma talk, as Master Bankei sat quietly before the assembled community, the visitor could not contain his excitement about sharing the miraculous abilities of his own teacher. When the formal talk concluded and time was given for questions, the visitor stood up eagerly. "Master Bankei," he began, his voice filled with admiration and perhaps a hint of challenge. "I must tell you about my teacher's truly extraordinary powers. Our founder was a truly great man, a living saint who could perform the most amazing miracles. Just last month, I personally witnessed him write a holy name through the air across a wide river, and the sacred characters appeared blazing in the sky for all to see. The entire village was filled with wonder and devotion. Can you perform such miraculous feats? Do you have powers like this to demonstrate the depth of your realization?" The visitor sat down, clearly expecting to be impressed by Bankai's response, perhaps hoping to witness some supernatural demonstration, or at least hear descriptions of equally marvelous abilities. The other students in the hall turned their attention to their teacher, curious how he would respond to this implicit challenge. Master Bankei remained completely still for several moments, his expression neither defensive nor dismissive, but simply present and attentive. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and matter-of-fact, without any trace of competition or superiority. "Perhaps your teacher can indeed perform that kind of miracle," Bankei said calmly. "I do not doubt what you have witnessed, and I have no criticism of such demonstrations. But I must tell you honestly that is not my way. Such powers do not interest me, and I do not cultivate them." The visitor looked somewhat disappointed and pressed further. "But Master, if you cannot perform such wonders, what then distinguishes your teaching? What is your miracle? How do we know that you have achieved genuine realization?" Master Bankai's eyes twinkled with the kind of gentle humor that often accompanies profound truth. He looked directly at his questioner with complete sincerity and replied, "My miracle is this: when I feel hungry, I eat. When I feel thirsty, I drink. When I am tired, I sleep. When spring comes, I notice the flowers blooming. When winter arrives, I observe the snow falling. This is my miracle, to be completely present for the simple reality of each moment." The hall fell into deep silence as the implications of this teaching settled deeply into the awareness of everyone present. The visitor who had come expecting supernatural demonstrations found himself confronted with something far more challenging: the invitation to recognize the miraculous nature of his own immediate experience. The Buddha taught, there are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. The heart of Bankai's lesson lies in recognizing that the miracle we seek is not hidden in extraordinary, difficult demonstrations, but reveals itself fully in the complete embrace of ordinary experience. Why do we so often overlook the miraculous nature of our everyday existence? Zen Buddhism reveals several layers of conditioning that blind us to what is always already present. First is what we might call spiritual materialism, the unconscious belief that enlightenment must be dramatic, supernatural, or visibly impressive. We imagine that awakened consciousness should produce extraordinary powers, mystical visions, or at least some obvious signs that clearly distinguish the enlightened from the ordinary. Second is our habituation to the familiar. The mind tends to dismiss as mundane precisely those experiences that are most constantly available: breathing, seeing, tasting, feeling, the simple fact of awareness itself. We become so accustomed to these fundamental miracles that we stop recognizing them as miracles at all. It's as if we are fish who have completely forgotten the water we swim in. Third is our cultural conditioning toward complexity and achievement. We live in a society that values the rare, the difficult, and the spectacular. This conditioning seeps into our spiritual seeking, making us believe that profound truth must be complicated, esoteric, or accessible only through years of specialized training. The possibility that ultimate reality might be as simple as feeling hungry and eating fundamentally challenges our entire framework of what spiritual accomplishment should look like. Consider your own experience right now as you engage with these words. Notice the miracle of vision, how marks on a page or patterns of light on a screen somehow transform into meaning in your consciousness. Observe the mystery of understanding, how abstract concepts arise in awareness without any effort on your part. Feel the rhythm of breathing that continues without your direction, the beating of your heart that sustains life moment by moment. These experiences are so ordinary that we typically ignore them completely, yet each one represents a profound mystery that no science can fully explain. How does consciousness arise from matter? How does awareness recognize itself? How does meaning emerge from pattern? These are questions that point to the miraculous nature of the most basic aspects of existence. Master Bankai's miracle of eating when hungry and drinking when thirsty points to what Zen calls natural functioning, the spontaneous responsiveness of awakened consciousness to the needs of each moment. This doesn't mean being reactive or impulsive, but rather developing such intimate attunement to present reality that appropriate action arises naturally, without the interference of excessive thinking, second-guessing, or spiritual ambition. Zen teacher Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things." When we stop trying to be spiritual in some special way, when we abandon the search for extraordinary experiences, we become available to be completely present for the myriad small miracles that make up each day. This teaching doesn't diminish the value of dedicated practice, intensive meditation, or sincere study of wisdom traditions. Rather, it points to the ultimate goal of all such practices, not to achieve supernatural powers or accumulate spiritual experiences, but to become so naturally responsive to reality that our actions flow effortlessly from clear seeing rather than from ego-driven seeking. The miracle of eating when hungry extends to every aspect of daily life. It means speaking when speech is called for and remaining silent when words would be unnecessary. It means working with full attention when work is required and resting completely when rest is needed. It means feeling emotions fully as they arise, without either suppressing them or being overwhelmed by them. In practical terms, cultivating appreciation for ordinary miracles begins with what Zen calls beginner's mind, approaching familiar experiences with fresh attention, as if encountering them for the very first time. Try eating a meal with complete presence, noticing not just the flavors, but the incredible coordination of sensory experience, memory, and pleasure that makes eating possible. Pay attention to a conversation with a friend, marveling at the mysterious process by which thoughts in one mind somehow communicate themselves to another. Notice the miracle of sleep, how consciousness dissolves each night and reconstitutes itself each morning, the daily resurrection of awareness from the small death of unconsciousness. Watch how dreams arise from nowhere and return to nowhere, creating entire worlds that seem completely real while we are experiencing them. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, can you recognize the miracle in this simple transition from waking to sleeping? Can you feel the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary rhythm of your breath? Can you sense the satisfying weight of your body settling into stillness, and the natural, profound release of the day's residual activities and nagging concerns? As the Buddha sagely taught, if you truly loved yourself with unwavering devotion, you would never inflict harm upon your own spirit with negative or self-defeating thoughts. Perhaps the deepest, most authentic expression of self-love is the simple, radical appreciation for the sheer miracle of your own existence. Not the flawless, idealized version of yourself you might one day aspire to become, but the intensely breathing, feeling, and aware being you already are right here, right now. True miracles are fundamentally not violations of natural law, but rather deep, sudden recognitions of the natural law of consciousness itself. This includes the mysterious, wondrous fact that the universe has somehow awakened to itself through your eyes, experiences itself through your senses, and knows itself through your unique awareness. When you simply eat a meal because you are genuinely hungry, you are participating directly in the cosmic miracle of life sustaining and renewing itself. This is the miracle, and it belongs to you as well. As we continue our journey through the profound wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us explore a deceptively simple story about the most fundamental truth that relentlessly surrounds us, yet often remains entirely invisible. This is the tale of the fish and the ocean. In the vast, silent depths of the Pacific, where the tropical sunlight filtered down through shifting layers of brilliant blue and emerald green, and where coral gardens swayed gently in the currents, a young fish swam restlessly through familiar waters. Despite being completely surrounded by the staggering wonder of ocean life, schools of silver fish moving like flowing liquid metal, sea anemones dancing rhythmically in the current, and the steady, distant pulse of waves far above, the young fish felt deeply troubled by a persistent, nagging question. One day, approaching an ancient sea turtle whose shell bore the deep scars and quiet wisdom of countless journeys across the currents, the young fish asked earnestly, "Elder, I keep hearing other sea creatures talk about something they call the ocean. They speak of it with such reverence, as if it's the single most important thing in existence. But I've searched everywhere I can swim, and I simply cannot find this ocean anywhere. What exactly is this mysterious thing everyone talks about?" The old turtle's eyes, deep and patient like quiet tidal pools, regarded the young fish with gentle, knowing amusement. "Little one," the turtle replied in a voice worn smooth by decades of storms and calms, "the ocean is this very thing that surrounds you completely on all sides at every single moment." The young fish looked around frantically, darting left and right, swimming up toward the distant, shimmering surface and down toward the sandy bottom. "But I don't see anything surrounding me," he protested. "There's nothing here but water and fish and plants and rocks. Where is this ocean you speak of? Why can't I see it?" The turtle settled more comfortably on a soft bed of vibrant kelp, understanding that this was a teaching moment that required deep patience. "Of course, you cannot see it, young friend," the turtle explained softly. "The ocean is both inside and outside of you. You were born within the ocean. You breathe the ocean. You are nourished constantly by the ocean. And one day you will naturally return to the ocean. The ocean flows through your gills and around your body just as naturally and effortlessly as your own scales cover your skin. It is so utterly much a part of you, so essential to your existence, that it has become completely invisible." The young fish paused, his rapid movements stilled, beginning to sense something vast and fundamental that had been profoundly present all along but had remained unnamed and unrecognized. "You mean this water I swim through is the ocean?" "Yes," the turtle confirmed quietly. "You have never been separate from it. Not for a single moment of your existence. As the Buddha observed in his final instruction, all conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on with awareness." This ancient wisdom profoundly illuminates our relationship with the Tao, that fundamental flow of existence that permeates absolutely everything, yet remains largely unnoticed in the hurry and clutter of our daily lives. What emerges most clearly from this story is a powerful, profound teaching about the nature of spiritual blindness. Like the young fish who cannot perceive the ocean, we live entirely immersed in the sacred, yet we persistently fail to recognize it because it is too close, too constant, too fundamental to our existence to register as something separate from ourselves. Why do we struggle so persistently to perceive the Tao, this universal flow that sustains and surrounds us? Zen Buddhism directly points to our ingrained habit of seeking the dramatic and extraordinary while overlooking the simple, accessible truth of the ordinary. We imagine that spiritual truth must necessarily be dramatic, mystical, or utterly separate from everyday experience. We look for God or the ultimate reality in symbolic burning bushes while consistently missing the divine presence inherent in our morning coffee, in the simple, automatic rhythm of the breath entering our lungs, and in the sheer, undeniable fact of awareness itself. The Tao expresses itself perfectly and completely in everything we encounter. The changing seasons, the cycles of sleep and waking, the steady rhythm of our heartbeat, and the quiet, natural way thoughts arise and subsequently dissolve in consciousness. It acts as the underlying organizing principle behind both the magnificent spiral of distant galaxies and the delicate unfurling of fern leaves, the same fundamental pattern expressing itself across every single scale of existence. Consider how often throughout your day you might glimpse this underlying flow without consciously recognizing it. The way traffic naturally organizes itself into patterns despite having no central controller. The effortless way conversations find their own rhythm and timing. The way your body breathes without conscious direction. Or the way elegant solutions to difficult problems seem to emerge from somewhere beyond deliberate, strenuous thinking. These are all subtle, ongoing expressions of the Tao working through apparent chaos to create spontaneous and natural order. Zen teacher Alan Watts beautifully taught. Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The Tao is similar. It cannot be conceptually grasped or contained because we are fundamentally expressions of it, rather than separate, external observers of it. Every attempt to understand the Tao through purely conceptual thinking is exactly like the fish trying to get outside the ocean just to examine it objectively. This recognition does not mean the Tao is merely a distant philosophical concept. On the contrary, it is the most practical and immediate reality. It is the intelligence that effortlessly coordinates the trillions of cells in your body, the awareness in which all thoughts and sensations appear, and the vibrant life force that animates everything from ancient redwood trees to the smallest forms of bacteria. In classical Chinese philosophy, the character for Tao literally means the way or the path. But this is not a linear path we walk towards some distant, future destination. It is the path that gracefully walks itself through us, the way reality unfolds moment by moment without requiring our constant management or control. Lao Tzu wisely wrote, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." Yet here we are, necessarily using limited words to point towards something fundamentally beyond words. This is the beautiful central paradox of spiritual teaching. We must use the limited structure of language to point towards the unlimited reality, knowing full well that the finger pointing at the moon is never the moon itself. Tonight, as you feel the breath moving gently in and out of your body without requiring your conscious control, can you sense the Tao expressing itself through this simple, profound miracle? Can you recognize in this automatic, sustaining process the same intelligence that moves the planets and changes the seasons? The Buddha taught, "Look within. Thou art the Buddha." You are no more separate from the ocean of existence than a single wave is separate from the vast sea. In recognizing this fundamental non-separation, we stop frantically seeking the Tao and instead begin consciously living as its direct, embodied expression. As we continue our exploration through the practical wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us now explore a compelling story about contentment and the subtle, deceptive nature of desire. This is the stonecutter's journey. High in the remote mountain villages, there lived a simple stonecutter who had accidentally discovered the secret of happiness without ever needing to define it. Each dawn, he would cheerfully climb winding paths to the quarries, his tools balanced easily across his shoulders. As he worked among the heavy stones, he would sing old mountain songs that echoed sweetly across the valleys. Though he was poor by society's measures, living in a modest hut with few possessions, the stonecutter desired nothing more than what he already had. His simple life felt profoundly complete. The steady rhythm of his work, the breathtaking beauty of the mountains, and the deep satisfaction of honest labor. His heart truly held not a care in the world. One day, however, He was called to work on the grand, sprawling mansion of a wealthy nobleman. As he approached the estate, his eyes widened dramatically at the sheer magnificence before him. Polished marble columns reached toward the sky. Gardens sprawled in perfect, deliberate symmetry. For the very first time in his life, the stone cutter felt the sharp, unexpected pang of desire pierce the core of his deep contentment. If only I were rich, he sighed heavily. Then I would not have to earn my living in sweat and relentless toil as I do now. To his utter amazement, a clear voice whispered from the surrounding stones, "Your wish has been granted. Henceforth, anything you truly desire will instantly be given to you." He returned home that evening to find his humble hut miraculously replaced by a mansion as grand and magnificent as the nobleman's. Overwhelmed with sudden joy and disbelief, he immediately abandoned his tools and began enjoying the luxurious, effortless life of the wealthy. But one hot afternoon, gazing listlessly from his ornate window, he saw the king's royal procession passing by. The monarch sat comfortably in cool shade, surrounded by noblemen and servants, appearing serene and powerful, elevated entirely above the common, scorching heat. "How I wish I were a king myself," he thought impulsively, and instantly found himself reclining on silk cushions within the royal carriage. But the carriage proved warmer than expected. Even through its thick walls, the summer sun's heat penetrated relentlessly. "I wish I were the sun," he passionately declared, and immediately found himself sending immense waves of light and heat across the entire universe. As the sun, he felt magnificent and all-powerful, until thick storm clouds gathered, completely blocking his radiant rays. "I wish to be a cloud," and so he instantly became a massive storm cloud, glorying in his newfound power to block the mighty sun. But as he transformed into falling, heavy rain, he suddenly encountered an enormous, immovable rock that blocked his path completely. "A mere rock, more powerful than I," he thought incredulously. "I wish to be a rock." Suddenly he stood tall upon the mountainside, feeling he had finally achieved true, unyielding permanence. But soon he heard rhythmic chipping sounds at his base. Looking down, he saw a tiny human figure cutting chunks of stone away. "A puny creature, more powerful than me. I want to be a man again." And so he found himself once more a stone cutter, climbing the familiar mountain paths. But now something fundamental had changed. As he shaped the stones and felt the cool mountain breezes, his heart swelled with deep, genuine contentment. His song returned, richer and more resonant than before, because he had finally learned to be content with exactly who he was. The Buddha once said, "Health is the greatest gift, contentment, the greatest wealth." This ancient wisdom brilliantly illuminates the endless, exhausting cycle of wanting that continuously keeps us from recognizing the profound abundance already present in the simplicity of our lives. Why do we ceaselessly chase after different conditions or external circumstances, always believing that true happiness lies just beyond the next transformation? Each desire we fulfill only immediately reveals the next desire in line, thereby creating an endless, spiraling cycle of dissatisfaction. The stone cutter's cyclical journey powerfully reveals the inherent futility of seeking lasting happiness through the manipulation of external circumstances. Consider your own internal versions of this cycle. "I'll be happy when I get promoted," only to discover a whole new layer of stresses. "I'll be content with more money," only to find that greater wealth brings new, complex worries. In our driven state, each achievement simply reveals the next, higher mountain to climb. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi famously said, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This essential paradox points directly to the heart of true contentment. The ability to fully accept what is present right now, while still engaging wholeheartedly with life's natural, ongoing changes. The stonecutter's final transformation wasn't into something externally greater, but into a deep appreciation for what he had always fundamentally been. His physical work remained exactly the same, but his internal relationship to life was completely transformed. Contentment is not found in having different experiences, but in deliberately bringing a different, appreciative awareness to whatever experiences naturally arise. Tonight, as you notice the mind's habitual reaching toward what is not here, can you experiment with the stonecutter's final wisdom? Can you find the spontaneous song that emerges when you stop trying to be anything other than exactly what you are? As the Buddha taught, contentment is natural wealth. Luxury is artificial poverty. The greatest, most liberating transformation available to us is not becoming something fundamentally different, but recognizing the inherent, unqualified completeness of what we already are. Our next story reveals the crucial difference between mere intellectual knowledge and genuine, embodied awareness. This is the tale of the teacher who thought he had arrived. After a decade of intensive training under various masters, studying countless philosophical texts, and dedicating himself wholly to rigorous Zen practice, a monk named Tenno finally achieved what he had long sought: formal recognition as a qualified teacher. His understanding of Buddhist philosophy was profound, his meditation practice was deep and stable, and his ability to guide others had been thoroughly tested and approved. He received the formal acknowledgement that he was ready to teach the Dharma and help others along the demanding path of awakening. Proud of his monumental accomplishment and eager to learn from one of the most renowned masters of his time, Tenno decided to visit the famous Zen master Nannen. The older teacher's reputation for deep wisdom and penetrating insight was legendary throughout the region, and Tenno looked forward to engaging in deep Dharma discussions and perhaps receiving some final polishing of his sophisticated understanding. It was a typically rainy day when Tenno made his pilgrimage to Nannen's temple. The roads were muddy and slippery. Puddles reflected the gray sky, and the steady rainfall required him to carry an umbrella to stay dry. When he reached the temple, he carefully removed his wooden clogs and placed them on the covered porch along with his umbrella, exactly as custom dictated. He arranged his outer robes, composed himself properly, and then entered the temple to meet the great master. Nannen received him graciously, bowing with the respect due to a fellow teacher while subtly maintaining the quiet dignity of his greater experience. They sat together in the simple receiving room, and Tenno fully expected their conversation to focus on sophisticated points of doctrine, subtle aspects of meditation technique, or perhaps the challenges of guiding students. Instead, after the initial pleasantries, Nannen asked what seemed like an absurdly mundane question. "I noticed you left your wooden clogs and umbrella on the porch when you entered. Tell me, did you place your umbrella to the left of your shoes or to the right?" Tenno was caught completely off guard. Of all the profound topics they could discuss, why was this renowned master asking about such a trivial, forgettable detail? He desperately tried to recall the moment he had arranged his belongings, but realized with growing dismay that he had absolutely no idea. He had been so focused on the importance of this meeting, so preoccupied with the impressive conversation he expected to have, that he had performed the simple, customary act of arranging his belongings in a state of complete unconsciousness. I don't know," Tenno admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. In that humbling moment of confession, the full, crushing implications of his ignorance became suddenly clear to him. Here he was, a certified, experienced teacher of mindfulness and awareness, and yet he couldn't even recall a simple action he had performed with his own hands just minutes earlier. Nannen smiled with infinite compassion, not mockery. "Then you have not yet attained full awareness," he said gently, without judgment. "Someone who is truly awake pays complete, total attention to every moment, every action, every minor detail of experience. The way you arrange your belongings reflects precisely the same quality of attention you bring to formal meditation, to teaching, and to all of life. In that instant, Tenno's hard-won pride in his accomplishments crumbled entirely, replaced by a humbling recognition of exactly how much deeper his practice truly needed to go. He understood that true awareness isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever as a static title. It's a dynamic quality of attention that must be cultivated, renewed, and maintained in every single moment, in the most ordinary activities just as much as in the most exalted spiritual practices. Without hesitation, Tenno requested to become Nanen's student. For the next 10 years, he studied tirelessly under the master's guidance, learning to bring the exact same quality of conscious attention to placing his shoes that he brought to formal meditation, and to treat the arrangement of an umbrella with the same reverence he showed to sacred texts. When he finally left Nanen's temple, he was a completely different kind of teacher. One who understood that enlightenment is not a distant destination but a conscious way of traveling. It is not an achievement to be listed, but a continuous practice of complete moment-to-moment presence. As the Buddha observed, if you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions. What emerges most sharply from this story is the recognition that true spiritual development is measured not by our rare peak experiences, but by the sustained quality of attention we bring to every ordinary, habitual moment. Why do we assume that enlightenment exists only in special circumstances, formal practices, or elevated states of consciousness? Zen Buddhism teaches us that awakening is found precisely in our unflinching ability to be fully present for whatever is actually happening. Whether it's sitting in silent meditation or simply placing an umbrella beside our shoes. Tenno's mistake was tragically common among spiritual practitioners. He had successfully developed the ability to be mindful during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet learned to extend that same quality of awareness to routine, everyday activities. He could be present while sitting in meditation, but unconscious while performing simple manual tasks. This artificial split between spiritual activities and ordinary activities is one of the most subtle, persistent traps on the path of awakening. We imagine that consciousness is something we turn on during meditation and conveniently turn off during mundane tasks. But true, mature practice integrates awareness into every single aspect of life. Consider your own daily routine. How profoundly present are you while brushing your teeth, making coffee, or simply putting on your shoes? Do you perform these essential activities with the same quality of focused attention you might bring to tasks you deem more important? The gap between formal practice and informal practice often serves as the clearest indicator of exactly where our awareness needs to deepen and become more consistent. Zen Master Dogen taught, "Practice and enlightenment are one." This means that the quality of consciousness we cultivate in any given moment is simultaneously both the path and the destination. Every moment offers a complete, immediate opportunity for awakening. Nanen's question was ultimately not about umbrellas and shoes. It was about whether Tenno's spiritual development had successfully penetrated into the cellular level of his daily existence. Could he maintain the same quality of presence while performing unconscious, routine habits that he brought to conscious spiritual practice? The Buddha said, "Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. Those who are mindful do not die. Those who are heedless are as if dead already." True aliveness is inherently found in complete presence, and complete presence can be cultivated in any activity, no matter how simple or mundane it might appear. Look deeply at your own relationship between formal practice and daily life. Where do you treat certain activities as worthy of elevated attention while others are performed entirely on autopilot? This isn't about becoming obsessively focused on every tiny detail, but about recognizing that the same powerful capacity for presence that serves us so well in meditation can fundamentally transform every aspect of our lives. The paradox is that the most ordinary moments often offer the greatest, most truthful opportunities for awakening. When we're sitting in formal meditation, we naturally expect to be mindful. But when we're simply arranging our belongings or performing routine tasks, we have a clear chance to discover whether our practice has truly taken deep root or remains confined only to special circumstances. In Zen temples, students are carefully taught that washing dishes is as sacred as chanting sutras, and that sweeping floors is as critically important as studying philosophy. This is not because these activities are inherently special, but because the uncompromising quality of consciousness we bring to any activity determines its ultimate spiritual value. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "Washing dishes is not only a way to have clean dishes. Washing dishes is also a way to live fully in each moment." This points to the fundamental teaching that Nanan was offering Tenno. Every single action is an opportunity to practice complete presence. The master's question revealed that Tenno's decade of training had successfully developed his capacity for awareness during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet fully integrated that awareness into the seamless flow of daily life. He could be conscious when he intended to be conscious, but he hadn't yet learned to make consciousness his natural, effortless default state. This deep integration is precisely what distinguishes genuine spiritual maturity from mere spiritual knowledge. It's relatively easy to be mindful when we remember to be mindful. The deeper, more advanced practice is developing the kind of spontaneous, natural awareness that operates whether we're actively thinking about it or not. Tonight, as you perform the simple actions that conclude your day, brushing your teeth, changing clothes, arranging items for tomorrow, can you bring the same quality of attention you might dedicate to formal meditation? Can you discover whether your spiritual practice has truly penetrated into the unconscious habits that make up so much of daily life? The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, every moment is a teacher, and every place is a classroom. The umbrella beside the shoes was Tenno's profound teacher that day, revealing exactly where his practice needed to deepen. Sometimes the most profound lessons come disguised as the most ordinary questions, asked by masters wise enough to see that true awakening is found not in transcending the mundane but in discovering the sacred hidden within it. Let us now turn to a tale about the thin, razor-sharp boundary between heaven and hell, a boundary that resides entirely within our own hearts. This is the story of the samurai and the gates in feudal Japan. In feudal Japan, a battle-hardened warrior named Nuiji sought out the renowned Zen master Hakuin. The samurai's heavy armor bore the deep scars of countless conflicts, and his eyes carried the weighty exhaustion of a man who had seen far too much violence. He approached the master's simple dwelling with a question that had been burning fiercely in his mind since his last campaign. "Master Hakuin," Nuiji said, bowing stiffly in his heavy armor, "I have spent my entire life fighting for my lord, facing death countless times. Tell me truthfully, is there really a paradise and a hell awaiting us after death?" Hakuin looked up slowly from his tea, studying the warrior with penetrating, unwavering eyes. "Who are you to ask such a question?" he inquired calmly. "I am a samurai," the warrior replied with pride, straightening his broad shoulders. "I serve my lord with honor and have never retreated from battle." Hakuin's expression suddenly shifted to one of blatant disdain. "You a soldier?" he exclaimed with a loud, dismissive laugh. "What kind of foolish ruler would have you as his guard? Look at yourself. Your face looks like that of a common beggar, weathered and crude, possessed an audacity that defied belief. How dared this lowly figure claim the mantle of protector to noble warriors? The monk's words struck Nushiga with the force of a physical assault. A hot flush of rage spread across his face, and his hand instinctively tightened around the hilt of his sword. This grievous insult to his samurai honor was utterly intolerable. "So, you carry a sword?" Hakuin pressed on, his voice saturated with derision. "I suspect that weapon of yours is far too dull even to sever my head. In fact, I doubt it could slice through a flimsy rice paper screen, much less serve to defend anyone of true importance." Unable to suppress the violent tempest within him, Noiga began to draw his sword. The steel sang a chilling note as it hissed free from its scabbard. His whole being vibrated and trembled with uncontrolled fury. His world narrowed, focusing entirely on this audacious monk who had so brazenly challenged his very identity and honor. It was at that precise, fateful moment, just as the polished blade caught the sharp afternoon light, that Hakuan spoke with startling, immediate clarity. "Here open the gates of hell." Hakuan's declaration pierced through Noiga's blinding rage like an arrow finding its mark. In a flash of terrifying clarity, the samurai saw himself, consumed by scorching anger, prepared to commit murder merely over his wounded pride. His consciousness had been entirely obscured by this destructive fury. He understood immediately that hell was not some mythological, distant realm, but the precise, suffocating state of mind he occupied right then. The samurai's hand froze solid on his drawn sword as a profound recognition washed over his features. Slowly, deliberately, and with deep reverence, Noiga returned his sword to its scabbard and bowed low before the Zen master. His explosive anger had transformed instantly into profound, silent gratitude. "Here, open the gates of paradise," Hakuan stated gently, his voice now imbued with pure compassion. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal, unchanging rule. What crystallizes from this powerful narrative is a startling revelation regarding the actual geography of our inner world. Heaven and hell, it suggests, are not distant future destinations. They are present moment experiences, constantly being created by the quality of our consciousness. Why is it that we find ourselves so easily stepping through the gates of hell? Zen Buddhism points specifically to the three poisons that inevitably cloud the mind: greed, hatred, and delusion. When Noiga's pride was challenged and wounded, hatred arose instantly, shattering the peace of the afternoon and plunging him into a realm of acute internal suffering. His reality shifted violently, from polite curiosity about the afterlife to homicidal fury, in mere moments. The profound lesson here is that we inherently carry within us the capacity for both states. Paradise and hell are not locales we journey to after death. They are states of being we inhabit while still alive. Every single moment presents us with a critical choice: the hell of unconscious reactivity or the paradise of pure awareness. Consider the frequency with which similar, smaller-scale transformations occur in your own daily life. A critical email lands in your inbox, and suddenly your peaceful morning is transformed into a landscape of anxiety and simmering resentment. An aggressive driver cuts you off in traffic, and the calm spaciousness of your journey contracts instantly into a tight, visceral knot of irritation. A thoughtless remark from a colleague dissolves your easy contentment into sharp hurt feelings and defensive, spiraling thoughts. Through dedicated Zen practice, we cultivate the vital capacity to recognize these precise moments of transition. Like the samurai drawing his sword, we train ourselves to halt at the very instant we are about to enter hell through our automatic reactions. This instantaneous recognition is itself the key that unlocks the gates of paradise. The great Zen master Huangpa taught, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." When we are trapped in reactivity, we reject the fundamental reality of the present moment. We reject the master's teaching, the direct opportunity for awakening, in favor of our rigid mental scripts concerning how things should be. As the Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Hakuan's cutting, Apparent insults were not acts of cruelty but rather compassion delivered in a profound disguise. By provoking Noiga's anger with such surgical skill, he instantly showed the warrior exactly the truth he needed to witness. That hell is fundamentally a state of mind we choose to enter through our own reaction. This potent teaching invites us to rigorously examine our own internal triggers. What specific words, situations, or conditions instantly transport us to the gates of hell? Perhaps it is feeling undervalued at work, being painfully misunderstood by family members, or having to navigate unexpected challenges. Every one of these experiences presents us with the exact same stark choice that Noiga faced. Will we draw our conceptual sword in defense of our ego, or will we pause and recognize the teaching embedded in the moment? As you feel a sharp irritation welling up in response to some minor frustration, can you recall Hakuan's devastating lesson? Can you identify the split second when you are about to enter hell through your unconscious reactions, and instead deliberately choose the paradise of awareness? As the Buddha wisely taught, what we think, we become. In every present moment, we are actively either opening the gates of hell through knee-jerk, unconscious reactivity, or opening the gates of paradise through sustained, mindful presence. Let us now turn our focus to a story that explores the vital relationship between outer circumstances and the necessity of inner cultivation. This is the tale of the horse and the mind. In a remote, isolated mountain region, one where the grim reality of execution grounds served as a potent, sobering reminder of mortality, the Zen master Bankai sought to rigorously test the depth of his spiritual realization. For several successive nights, he chose to meditate beneath a bare wooden crucifix, utilizing the immediate proximity of death to penetrate more profoundly into the nature of existence itself. Having completed this intense retreat, Bankai sought a spot nearby where he might rest his body. He discovered a peaceful embankment bordering a horse corral, where he lay down to continue his contemplation beneath the vast, open sky, absorbed in profound, settled silence. Suddenly, a harsh, violent sound brutally shattered his inner peace. From within the enclosure of the corral rose the shocking sounds of a warrior mercilessly beating his horse. The animal's distressed cries mingled sickeningly with the sharp crack of a whip and the angry, desperate shouts of a man who had clearly lost all control. Master Bankai observed the scene with escalating concern. The warrior was demonstrably frustrated, channeling his inner turmoil and impatience onto the innocent animal. Tragically, each aggressive blow only seemed to make the horse more frightened and agitated rather than compliant, trapping them both in a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle of violence and frantic resistance. Unable to stand idly by, Bankai called out sharply from his resting place. "Hey! What do you think you are doing?" The warrior, entirely consumed by his rage, ignored the interruption and continued his harsh, relentless treatment. The beating intensified, and so too did Bankai's deep concern. Not just for the terrified animal, but for the man who was so thoroughly degrading himself through such cruelty. "Hey!" Bankai called out again, his voice resonating now with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades cultivating profound inner peace. "What do you think you are doing?" Yet, the warrior persisted, utterly lost in his mounting frustration and corrosive anger. The horse became frantically panicked, a reaction which only served to fuel the man's desperate determination to force compliance through brute violence. A third time, Bankai's voice cut through the commotion, ringing clear and unmistakable. "Hey! What do you think you are doing?" This time, miraculously, something in the master's unshakable tone finally penetrated the warrior's furious haze. The man instantly ceased his beating, dismounted his horse, and trudged toward the embankment. As he approached, his enraged expression began to soften and change. There was a compelling quality about this stranger that commanded inherent respect. a depth of presence that clearly signaled years of dedicated inner development. "You were yelling at me?" the warrior said. His voice still edged with residual anger but now colored by genuine curiosity. "Do you have something specific you wish to tell me?" Bankai looked upon the man not as an antagonist, but with deep compassion, recognizing someone trapped in the very same cycles of frustration that ensnare all of humanity. His reply was deceptively simple yet profoundly insightful. "Rather than beating your horse for being unruly, why not take responsibility, chastise yourself, and train your own mind instead?" The question hung heavily between them, functioning like a structural bridge connecting two diametrically opposed approaches to confronting difficulty. The warrior had been trying, disastrously, to solve his problem through external force and coercive control. Bankai was revealing an entirely different path. As the Buddha himself observed, conquer anger with non-anger, conquer badness with goodness, conquer meanness with generosity, conquer dishonesty with truth. This timeless teaching captures the precise essence of Bankai's offering to the frustrated warrior. The essential recognition that our external struggles are merely a reflection or mirror of our internal untrained state. What emerges most clearly from this story is the profound insight that we simply cannot successfully coerce the world to conform to our stringent expectations through the use of aggression or forceful control. The warrior's method, beating the horse into submission, perfectly represents how frequently we attempt to manage difficult circumstances in our own complex lives. We become quickly frustrated with external conditions and react with aggression, harsh criticism, or manipulation, completely failing to recognize that the true, essential work lies entirely within. Why do we possess such a persistent instinct to blame external circumstances for our frustration? Buddhist psychology clarifies that the untamed mind tirelessly seeks to maintain its comfort by meticulously controlling its environment, rather than developing the inner flexibility required to respond skillfully to whatever might arise. This destructive behavior creates what Zen practitioners call pushing the river, a continuous, exhausting effort to force reality to align with our predefined preferences. Consider closely how destructive this pervasive pattern manifests in our daily existence. The computer that fatally crashes during a crucial project becomes the target of our intense fury, when the true issue is our deep attachment to the unrealistic expectation that technology should operate flawlessly. The unexpected traffic jam that guarantees our lateness triggers immediate road rage, when the actual problem is our rigid expectation that travel should always be smooth and uninterrupted. The family member who disregards our well-meaning advice becomes the immediate focus of our frustration, when the deeper issue is our ingrained need to control the choices and autonomy of others. In every instance, we behave exactly like the warrior beating the horse, applying force or criticism to external circumstances while entirely neglecting the internal conditions of expectation and attachment that generate our suffering. The horse, in this teaching, clearly represents the fundamentally uncontrollable aspects of life. The unpredictable behavior of others, inevitable natural events, technological failures, and the inherent, messy unpredictability of existence itself. As the contemporary Zen teacher Pema Chodron writes, "You are the sky. Everything else is just the weather." This beautifully articulates the same core truth Bankai offered the warrior. Instead of vainly attempting to control the constantly shifting weather of external circumstances, we possess the capacity to cultivate a spacious awareness that remains calm and stable regardless of the prevailing conditions. The real work, the genuine training, involves learning how to skillfully work with our own minds, rather than attempting to force compliance from the vast world around us. This crucial realization does not imply becoming passive or tolerating genuinely harmful situations. Rather, it means approaching all challenges from a position of profound inner stability instead of knee-jerk, reactive frustration. Buddhist practice provides specific, powerful techniques for this internal training. Mindfulness meditation teaches us how to observe our reactive patterns as they arise, without being instantly swept away by them. Loving kindness practice cultivates genuine compassion for ourselves and for others when circumstances inevitably fail to meet our expectations. And the contemplation of impermanence helps us accept the ceaselessly changeable nature of all conditions. Tonight, as you inevitably encounter the small or large frustrations of daily life, can you consciously remember Bankai's central teaching? When you feel the instinctive urge to beat the horse of difficult circumstances, can you pause and simply ask, what would it mean to train my own mind instead? The Buddha's wisdom instructs us, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. The path toward lasting peace lies not in conquering or controlling external conditions, but in diligently cultivating the inner qualities that remain stable and tranquil regardless of what the world chooses to present. Let us now continue our journey with a story that perfectly illustrates the maintenance of unshakable inner balance, irrespective of external circumstances. This is the teaching of Master Hakuin and the extraordinary power of the phrase, "Is that so?" Master Hakuin resided in a modest village where he was universally respected for his profound wisdom, boundless compassion, and truly exemplary character. For decades, he had meticulously maintained an impeccable reputation as a pure, enlightened teacher. A man who was thought to have transcended ordinary human frailties and who embodied the highest spiritual ideals. Villagers regularly sought Hakuin out, bringing their troubles and seeking guidance and inspiration derived from his teachings and his untarnished way of life. In the very same village lived a beautiful young woman from a well-established and respected family. When she became pregnant out of wedlock, her condition ignited a scandalous firestorm that violently rippled through the tight-knit community. Her parents were livid, furiously demanding to know the identity of the person responsible for inflicting such catastrophic shame upon their lineage. Initially, the young woman steadfastly refused to reveal the father's identity, committed to protecting a lover whose reputation and entire future would be utterly destroyed if the truth emerged. However, as her parents' anger reached a boiling point and the community pressure became unbearable, she made a desperate, agonizing decision. In a moment of sheer panic and mental confusion, she pointed to the one person she believed possessed the inner strength to weather this devastating storm better than her actual lover, the venerable Master Hakuin. When the outraged parents confronted the Zen master with their daughter's shocking accusation, they fully expected vehement protests of innocence, exhaustive explanations, or, at the very least, some palpable expression of shock at being so falsely accused. Instead, Hakuin listened calmly to their furious accusations and simply replied, "Is that so?" His serene response seemed only to confirm their worst suspicions. Surely, an innocent man would defend himself far more vigorously. The scandal exploded across the village like a bomb. People who had once revered Hakuin as a living saint now openly whispered that he was nothing more than a hypocrite who had been living a shameful lie. His stellar reputation was annihilated overnight, and his former students abandoned him completely in mutual disgust and disappointment. When the baby was finally born, the parents brought the infant directly to Hakuin's meager dwelling. "This is entirely your responsibility now," they declared bitterly. "Since you are the acknowledged father, you must care for this child." They brusquely thrust the newborn infant into his arms and departed, leaving him alone to bear the devastating consequences of a crime he had never committed. Once again, Hakuin simply uttered, "Is that so?" and accepted the baby without any protest or demand for explanation. For many subsequent months, the former master meticulously cared for the child with the most tender, unwavering attention. He fed the infant, changed soiled diapers, walked the floorboards during countless sleepless nights, and provided all the selfless love and care that any devoted, legitimate parent would give. Neighbors who had once showered him with offerings of food and respect now actively ignored him or spoke of him only with open contempt. He had forfeited his esteemed position, his spotless reputation, and his entire livelihood. Yet, he continued to care for the child with serene, peaceful dedication. Meanwhile, the young woman began to struggle acutely under the crushing weight of her lie. To watch the previously revered teacher suffer public humiliation for her deception, all while lovingly caring for a child that was not his, eventually became unbearable. The overwhelming guilt consumed her soul until she could no longer tolerate what she had done. Finally, she confessed the painful truth to her parents. The real father was a young man in the village, whom she had been desperately trying to protect. Her parents were instantly horrified to realize the terrible injustice they had inflicted upon an innocent man. They rushed immediately to Hakuin's simple dwelling, overwhelmed with profuse apologies. "Master, we have terribly wronged you," they cried, bowing deeply and frantically. "Our daughter has confessed that you are not the father. We know now that you have suffered unjustly because of our terrible mistake. Please, we beg you to forgive us and allow us to take the child back to its real family." Hakuin listened to their heartfelt apologies with the exact same unshakable equanimity he had demonstrated when first faced with their furious accusations. As he gently and calmly placed the baby back into their arms, he offered the identical, serene response he had given throughout the entire agonizing ordeal. Is that so? As the Buddha's wisdom teaches us, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. What emerges most forcefully from this incredible story is the profound, liberating power of maintaining inner equilibrium, a stable, balanced center, regardless of how others may perceive us or what chaotic circumstances life chooses to present. Why do we so easily permit external events and the fickle opinions of other people to hold our inner state hostage? Zen Buddhism teaches us that true, enduring freedom is achieved by developing an unshakable core that remains stable whether we are being lauded or condemned, honored or disgraced, treated fairly or subjected to gross injustice. Hakuin's consistent reply of, "Is that so?" represents an immensely profound spiritual practice. He was not being indifferent, nor was he passively accepting injustice. Rather, he was demonstrating the ultimate state of non-attachment to external reputation, social status, and even the immediate desire for justice itself. His uniform response proved that his intrinsic sense of worth and purpose was sourced entirely from within, utterly independent of external validation. Consider just how dramatically most of us would react to false accusations, public humiliation, and the complete destruction of our reputation. The deeply ingrained human response is to aggressively defend ourselves, to fiercely fight against injustice, and to demand that all observers recognize the truth of our innocence. But Hakuin's approach reveals a powerful, radical alternative, meeting every circumstance with the same peaceful acceptance. This is not a call for us never to defend ourselves or passively submit to all injustices. Hakuin's teaching is far more subtle and nuanced. He shows us that our fundamental inner peace does not have to be conditional upon external circumstances being fair, just, or favorable. We possess the ability to maintain our serene center regardless of how the outside world chooses to treat us. The Buddha taught, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." Hakuin's profound equanimity shielded him from the enormous, additional suffering that would have inevitably stemmed from resentment, crippling self-pity, or frantic attempts to rebuild his reputation. While the external situation was undeniably challenging and painful, he deliberately chose not to compound the difficulty through emotional resistance. Look deeply and honestly at your own reflexive reactions to criticism, profound misunderstanding, or unfair treatment. How much of your immediate suffering originates from the actual events themselves, and how much stems from your subsequent mental and emotional response to those events? Hakuin's powerful example suggests that we possess dramatically more control over this second, internal source of suffering than the first. Tonight, as you encounter whatever judgments, deep misunderstandings, or unjust treatments life may inevitably bring, can you consciously recall Master Hakuin's peaceful, accepting, "Is that so?" Can you succeed in finding the crucial space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond? In doing so, you discover that your intrinsic inner peace need never be held hostage by external circumstances. The Buddha's wisdom teaches us, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. True spiritual development is ultimately measured not by how favorably life treats us, but by how gracefully we can meet whatever life brings. Maintaining our compassion, dignity, and inner tranquility regardless of whether the world recognizes our inherent worth or accurately understands our true nature. We will now explore a story that delves into the paradoxical nature of genuine spiritual seeing and the fundamental limits of conceptual understanding. This is the teaching of 3 strikes and deeper vision. At the remote mountain monastery where the 6th patriarch, Hui Neng, taught, seekers traveled from across the breadth of China to study with the master, whose realization was widely considered to surpass that of all his contemporaries. Among these dedicated seekers was a brilliant young monk named Shun Hui, renowned for his razor-sharp intellect and his penetrating, probing questions. Unlike many of the students, who approached the patriarch with humble, basic requests for initial instruction, Shun Hui frequently challenged the master with sophisticated, highly philosophical inquiries. One serene afternoon, as warm golden sunlight streamed through the monastery windows and the air was filled with the peaceful, subtle sounds of monks engaged in their daily practice, Shun Hui discovered the 6th patriarch sitting quietly in the main hall. The master's posture was perfectly motionless, his breath soft and natural, his expression serene yet keenly alert, the very embodiment of meditation in action. Sensing an invaluable opportunity to measure his intellectual understanding against the master's profound realization, Shun Hui approached him with a question that had been persistently troubling him during his own meditation sessions. The precise nature of perception during spiritual practice had become a major source of curiosity and intellectual confusion. "Master," Shun Hui began, bowing respectfully but speaking with the distinct confidence of one who believed his question to be particularly insightful. "When you sit in deep meditation, do you see or do you not see?" To Shun Hui's mind, this was a perfectly logical and reasonable inquiry into the actual mechanics of enlightened awareness. Did awakened consciousness unlock special, new kinds of seeing? Did profound meditation unveil mystical visions or higher perceptions utterly unavailable to ordinary minds? Or did genuine realization transcend the act of seeing entirely, existing in some pure non-sensory state? What he received in response, however, was spectacularly unexpected. Without the slightest warning, the 6th patriarch abruptly picked up his heavy wooden teaching stick and struck Shun Hui 3 times in rapid, stinging succession. The blows were not gentle taps but delivered with enough force that they stung sharply, leaving the young monk both physically uncomfortable and profoundly mentally bewildered. "When I hit you," the patriarch inquired, using the same calm, detached tone one might use to discuss the mild weather, "does it hurt or does it not hurt?" Shun Hui instinctively rubbed his smarting shoulders, his sophisticated mind racing desperately to analyze the meaning of the sudden, violent exchange. The question itself appeared simple, yet the spiritual context strongly suggested that a straightforward answer would be utterly insufficient. The physical sensation of pain was undeniable, but the underlying spiritual implications felt agonizingly complex. "It both does and does not hurt," he replied carefully. correctly intuiting that the master was pointing toward a fundamental paradox that transcended ordinary, dualistic logic. "I both see and do not see," the sixth patriarch responded immediately, his words carrying the unmistakable weight of direct, lived experience rather than abstract philosophical speculation. However, Shun Hui's powerful intellect was not yet satisfied with mere paradox. He urgently needed to grasp the mechanics, to categorize and neatly explain this teaching in terms his conceptual mind could comfortably process. "How can you both see and not see?" he pressed, genuine confusion audible in his voice. "That seems fundamentally contradictory. Either one sees during meditation, or one does not. How can both simultaneously be true?" The patriarch's final response was delivered with the patient clarity of someone who had spent many decades guiding students past the inherent limitations of dualistic thinking. "What I see," he explained with gentle precision, "are the ceaseless waverings and wanderings of my own mind. What I do not see are the distinctions of right and wrong, and the good and bad behavior of other people. This, my young friend, is my seeing and not seeing." With these final words, the entire complex teaching immediately crystallized. The master was not describing mystical visions or transcendent, esoteric states, but rather the fundamental, practical shift in perception that naturally accompanies genuine spiritual maturity. Ancient Buddhist wisdom affirms, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." This timeless maxim relates profoundly to the patriarch's lesson on the nature of awakened perception. Why do we so often become intellectually confused when spiritual teachings move beyond the bounds of ordinary logic? Zen Buddhism explains that our default, conceptual mind operates exclusively through dualistic categories: seeing or not seeing, pain or no pain, right or wrong. But enlightened awareness does not eliminate these experiences. Instead, it fundamentally transforms our relationship to them. The deeper teaching here shows precisely what authentic spiritual perception entails. The patriarch clearly sees his own intricate mental processes, the ceaseless arising and passing of thoughts, emotions, and reactions. This is not some specialized mystical power, but the natural, inevitable result of sustained mindfulness practice. He observes the waverings and wanderings of his consciousness without ever becoming lost or identified with them. Simultaneously, he does not see in the judgmental sense, meaning he abstains from imposing rigid categories of right, wrong, good, or bad onto the behavior of others. This crucial non-seeing is not a state of ignorance, but one of profound wisdom, recognizing that such swift judgments often reveal far more about the observer's own mental projections than they do about the person being observed. Look deeply at your own habitual patterns of perception. How much of what you confidently believe you see in others is actually a reflection of your own internal mental projections? When a person irritates you, are you truly perceiving their actual behavior clearly? Or are you primarily seeing the flare-up of your own internal triggers and ingrained reactions? When someone impresses you, are you recognizing their genuine, intrinsic qualities? Or are you seeing your own unmet desires for approval or achievement reflected back? This ancient wisdom brilliantly illuminates the critical difference between reactive perception and clear seeing. Reactive perception is always colored by our accumulated past, our conditioning, emotional needs, and ingrained habits of judgment. Clear seeing, by contrast, is a form of awareness that observes its own inner workings while remaining fully receptive to the reality that is actually present. Zen Master Dogen illuminated this concept when he taught, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self." This profound statement points directly to the insight previously offered by the patriarch. Genuine seeing requires us to pivot our attention inward, observing our own mental processes rather than being preoccupied with external evaluations and judgments. The 3 painful strikes Shen Hui received were not intended as punishment, They were skillful teaching devices, a means of direct instruction. The physical pain that simultaneously hurts and does not hurt points toward the profound paradox inherent in conscious experience itself. Pain surfaces within awareness, is perceived fully, yet it fundamentally fails to define or confine the awareness that hosts it. In the same way, all thoughts and emotions arise within consciousness without ever truly contaminating or altering its essential, pristine clarity. Imagine how deeply this teaching could transform your daily life. Instead of perpetually evaluating the behavior of others, cataloging their faults, generating comparisons, and forming rigid opinions, what if you deliberately redirected that potent attention toward observing your own internal mental reactions? What subtle, hidden patterns would you begin to uncover in the ceaseless wanderings and waverings of your own mind stream? This crucial shift does not imply becoming passive or sacrificing our natural capacity for wise discernment. Instead, we cultivate the powerful ability to respond from a place of clarity rather than immediate reactivity. When we see our own judgmental tendencies with piercing clarity, we are naturally less ensnared by them. When we diligently observe our mental projections, we become far less likely to mistake them for objective reality. In Zen practice, this cultivated state is known as the mirror mind, an awareness that reflects everything that arises without being stained, altered, or attached to it. This inner mirror clearly perceives the world while fundamentally retaining its essential nature of emptiness and expansive openness. Tonight, as you observe your mind busily categorizing and judging the experiences of your day, can you pause and recall the patriarch's essential teaching? Can you deliberately turn your attention toward the seer, the awareness itself, rather than relentlessly evaluating what is seen? Can you unearth the profound freedom that emerges when you witness your own mental processes without being enslaved by them? The Buddha recognized this necessary inward movement when he stated, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." By mastering the art of observing our own mental patterns with compassion instead of judgment, we naturally develop the clarity needed to regard others with equal kindness and deep understanding. Let us now continue our journey by engaging with a story about discovering the true, internal source of freedom. This is the tale of the student and the master's heart. In a peaceful monastery garden where cherry blossoms drifted like soft snow, a young student approached his teacher during evening meditation. The master sat beneath an ancient maple tree, with twilight painting the sky in soft purples and golds. This student had been practicing earnestly for years, yet lately questions had arisen that reached deeper than formal instruction. Taking a seat beside his teacher, the student gathered the courage to voice what had been troubling him. "Master," he began quietly, "when I was young, I had a deep desire for my family and loved ones to be proud of me. I wanted to excel in studies, to accomplish things that would make them beam with joy. Were you ever the same way?" The master turned his gentle gaze toward the student, seeing in the young man's eyes the same earnest longing that had once driven his own spiritual seeking. After a moment of contemplative silence, he replied simply, "Yes, I was very much the same." The student felt immediate relief at this admission. "Why did you desire their pride so intensely?" he asked. What was driving that unrelenting need for approval? The master smiled with tender recognition. "I desired for them to have undeniable reason to offer me their love and acceptance," he shared thoughtfully. "If I could guarantee their pride, I felt certain their love would be both secure and abundant." Yet the root cause of this yearning extended even further. The student leaned closer, sensing they were approaching a foundational truth. "I sought their love so desperately," the master continued, "because I, in turn, would feel I had sufficient reason to love and accept myself. I was searching for permission from others to feel genuinely good about who I was. Their approval would serve as evidence of my own worthiness, even to myself. That was what truly lay at the root of all my striving. The master paused, watching the first stars appear in the deepening sky. But then one day, I awakened to a revolutionary possibility. I realized I could ask myself a fundamentally different question. What if I could bypass all external validation and simply learn to love and accept myself unconditionally? What if I didn't require anyone else's approval to feel truly good about my very existence? The student felt something shift in his chest as these words settled within him. I imagined what it would be like if my happiness no longer depended on outer circumstances, on whether people approved or disapproved of my choices. What if my sense of inherent worth could be as constant and unwavering as my own heartbeat, independent of any external validation? The student could feel his teacher's words pointing toward a profound freedom he had never considered. And that realization began your quest for self-realization. Exactly. The master nodded. That was when my true spiritual journey began. Not with seeking something outside myself, but with discovering what was already complete and whole within. After a contemplative silence, the student asked, "And did you never again desire their pride? Did that deep longing completely disappear?" The master chuckled softly. "Oh, my ego certainly continued to desire approval. Conditioned patterns don't vanish overnight, but something fundamental had shifted in my relationship to those desires. I no longer completely identified with my ego as I had before." He gestured toward the darkening garden where fireflies had begun their silent dance. "I learned to see those approval-seeking thoughts as passing phenomena, like these fireflies appearing and disappearing. I could observe them with interest and compassion, but I no longer gave them the power to determine my worth." "So you still cared what others thought?" the student inquired. "I respected their opinions and honored their perspectives," the master replied. "But I no longer gave them so much weight. Their approval became like the weather, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not, but no longer the determining factor in whether I felt at peace with myself." The master's face radiated quiet joy, and never had I felt so free as when I finally released myself in this way. It was like discovering I had been carrying invisible chains for decades, and suddenly they fell away. The love I had been seeking outside was revealed to have been within me all along. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, if you truly loved yourself, you would never hurt yourself with destructive thoughts, actions, or choices. This teaching points directly to the heart of the master's discovery. Most human suffering stems from the mistaken belief that we must earn the right to love ourselves through external achievements or approval. Here we discover one of the most revolutionary insights available to us. Self-love is not a reward to be earned, but our natural birthright to be claimed. We are born complete and worthy, not because of what we accomplish, but simply because we exist. Why do we find unconditional self-love so difficult? From early childhood, we absorb relentless messages suggesting that love must be earned through good behavior, achievement, or pleasing others. We learn to treat ourselves the way we were treated, often with criticism and conditions. These demanding patterns become so familiar that unconditional self-acceptance feels radically foreign. Our culture further intensifies this conditioning by promoting the myth that happiness comes solely from external sources. Every media message reinforces the delusion that we are incomplete as we are. Consider how much mental energy you devote to managing others' opinions. How often do you modify your authentic expression to gain approval? How much of your self-worth depends on external feedback rather than an internal recognition of your inherent value? When we love ourselves unconditionally, we establish a stable foundation of fulfillment that allows us to enjoy the affection of others without desperately depending on it. We can receive compliments with genuine gratitude rather than desperate hunger, and handle criticism without devastation because our core worth remains utterly untouched. The Buddha said, You can search throughout the entire universe for someone more deserving of your love and affection than you or yourself. And that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself deserve your love and affection. This deep self-regard is not narcissism. It is the fundamental recognition of a truth about consciousness itself. Tonight, as you rest in this moment's quiet, can you sense the presence that is reading these words? This awareness that knows your thoughts and witnesses your experiences is neither improved nor diminished by anything that happens. It remains constant and clear, like space itself. What would it be like to treat this aware presence with the tenderness it deserves? Perhaps you could offer yourself the same patience you would grant a beloved child learning a new skill, or the same compassion you would feel for a dear friend facing difficulties. As the Buddha taught, hatred is never appeased by hatred. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. Self-criticism is never healed by more self-criticism. Only by learning to love ourselves exactly as we are do we create the inner conditions for authentic transformation. In discovering this unconditional love within, we find that the freedom we sought through others' approval was always here, beating steadily in our own hearts. Let us continue our journey with a story about the transformative power of fearlessness and unconditional compassion. This is the tale of the thief and the Zen master. One quiet evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Zen master Shikiri Kojin sat in his simple home reciting ancient sutras. His voice flowed rhythmically through the peaceful rooms, each word a meditation, each breath a prayer. The soft glow of candlelight danced across the walls as he immersed himself completely in the sacred texts, finding deep tranquility in the familiar verses. Suddenly, the serenity was violently shattered. The front door burst open with a crash, and a desperate man entered, brandishing a sharp sword that gleamed menacingly in the candlelight. His eyes were wild with desperation, his clothes dirty and torn, and his breathing was heavy from running. He had clearly chosen this isolated house because he believed it would be an easy target. Surely a peaceful monk would offer no resistance. Money or your life? The thief demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and aggression. He expected the old man to cower, to plead, or to scramble frantically for whatever valuables he might have hidden away. But Shikiri didn't even look up from his sutra book. His voice remained calm and steady as he continued reciting for a moment before pausing to address the intruder. "Please don't disturb my practice," he said with the same gentle tone he might use to ask someone to close a door. "If you need money, help yourself. It's in that drawer over there." He gestured casually toward a simple wooden chest, then immediately returned to his recitation as if nothing unusual had occurred. The thief stood frozen, his sword still raised, completely bewildered. In all his years of stealing, he had never encountered such a reaction. There was no fear, no pleading, no anger, just matter-of-fact helpfulness, as if he were a neighbor who had stopped by to borrow something. Shaking his head in confusion, but proceeding with his business, the thief moved to the indicated drawer and began gathering the coins and small valuables he found there. The soft sound of the master's voice continued behind him, reciting sacred words as peacefully as if he were utterly alone. Just as the thief was preparing to leave with his stolen goods, the master's voice called out again. "Wait," Shikiri said, finally looking up from his book. "Please don't take everything. I need some of that money to pay my taxes tomorrow. Leave a little for me, won't you?" The thief stared at him in amazement. Here was a man who was being robbed, calmly negotiating the terms of his own robbery, as if they were conducting normal business. Almost without thinking, the thief returned some of the money to the drawer. As he turned to leave, certain that this strange encounter was finally over, the master's voice stopped him once more. "You took my money," Shikiri called out, his tone carrying a note of gentle reproach. "And you didn't even thank me. That's quite rude, don't you think?" This final comment left the thief completely speechless. His sword hand began to shake. Never in his most violent encounters had he been so thoroughly unnerved. Here was a man who treated robbery as if it were a favor, who was more concerned about common politeness than personal safety. "Thank you," the thief stammered, and then fled into the night as quickly as his legs would carry him. Later, when the thief was caught and confessed to numerous crimes, including the incident at Shakiri's house, the master was called as a witness. The court officials expected him to demand justice, to describe the terror and violation he had experienced. Instead, Shakiri spoke with the same calm clarity he had shown that evening. "This man did not steal anything from me," he testified. "I gave him the money freely. He even thanked me for it, though it took a little reminding." The thief, sitting in chains, felt something break open in his chest as he heard these words. This man had not only shown him extraordinary kindness in the moment of the crime, but was now protecting him from the legal consequences. For the first time in years, tears came to his eyes. Not tears of self-pity or anger, but tears of recognition. He had encountered something he had never experienced before: love without conditions. Upon his release from prison, the former thief sought out the master and begged to become his student. Under Shakiri's patient guidance, he learned to cultivate the same fearless compassion he had witnessed that night. Years later, through dedicated practice and the master's unwavering belief in his potential for transformation, he attained the deep peace and wisdom of enlightenment. As the Buddha observed, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. What emerges from this story is the revolutionary power of meeting violence with absolute inner peace. It is the power of responding to taking with giving, and answering fear with love. Why do we instinctively believe that force must be met with force? That aggression requires a defensive reaction. Zen Buddhism reveals that this habitual pattern, while natural, often perpetuates the very conflicts it seeks to resolve. When we respond to hostility with hostility, we simply escalate the cycle of suffering. But when we respond with genuine compassion, not passive submission, but active love, we create a space for transformation that wouldn't otherwise exist. Look deeply at your own experience. When someone approaches you with anger, criticism, or demand, what is your automatic response? Most of us immediately mobilize our defenses, preparing to protect ourselves through counterattack or withdrawal. But notice what happens in your body and mind during these defensive reactions. Does the tension decrease or increase? Does the conflict resolve or intensify? Shakiri's response demonstrates what Zen calls skillful means, acting from wisdom rather than mere reflex. His fearlessness didn't come from being unaware of danger, but from understanding something profound about the nature of reality. He recognized that the thief's aggression arose from desperation and suffering, not from inherent evil. By refusing to see him as an enemy, Shakiri created the possibility for the thief to see himself differently. In Zen practice, we cultivate what might be called the courage of defenselessness. This does not mean being naive about genuine danger or allowing ourselves to be harmed unnecessarily. Rather, it means developing the confidence to respond to difficult situations from our highest wisdom rather than our most primitive instincts. The Buddha taught, in the end, just three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. Shakiri embodied all three in his encounter with the thief. He lived from complete presence, loved without conditions, and let go of any attachment to his possessions or even his personal safety. Consider the people in your life who challenge you: the difficult colleague, the critical family member, the aggressive driver in traffic. What would it mean to meet their energy with the same kind of fearless compassion Shikiri showed? Not by agreeing with them or submitting to their demands, but by refusing to match their level of reactivity. By staying connected to your own center of peace, regardless of their behavior. Tonight, as you encounter your own moments of tension or conflict, can you remember the master who treated a robber as an honored guest? Can you find the space between stimulus and response where choice lives, where you can decide to meet aggression with peace, taking with giving, and fear with love? Buddha's wisdom reminds us, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Sometimes the most powerful response to violence is simply to remain unshakable in our commitment to compassion, knowing that love has a transformative power that force can never match. Now let us explore a Zen story about the irreplaceable nature of direct spiritual transmission. This is the tale of Bankei and the messenger. In the bustling capital city where merchants haggled in crowded marketplaces and scholars debated in tea houses, the renowned Zen master Bankei had completed another period of teaching at one of the great temples. Known throughout the region for his profound insight and ability to point students directly toward their Buddha nature, Bankei maintained a simple practice of traveling between temples, offering instruction wherever sincere students gathered. As the master prepared to depart for his next destination, carefully folding his few possessions into a traveling bundle, a well-dressed gentleman approached him with urgent politeness. The man's fine silk robes and careful manner suggested someone accustomed to moving in aristocratic circles, likely a retainer or aide to one of the noble families that supported the temple. "Venerable master," the gentleman said, bowing deeply, "I come with a request from the Baron, a man of great learning and sincere interest in your teachings. He has heard of your wisdom and wishes desperately to meet with you personally, but urgent matters have detained him today. Would you consider postponing your departure by one day so that he might have the honor of studying with you tomorrow?" Bankei, despite his eagerness to reach the next temple where students awaited him, recognized the genuine need in the request. The path of a teacher required flexibility and compassion, even when inconvenient. "Of course," he replied simply. "I shall remain one more day." The master unpacked his bundle and settled back into the temple quarters, spending the evening in quiet meditation and preparation for what he anticipated would be a meaningful encounter with a sincere seeker. He had met many nobles over the years who approached Zen with genuine humility despite their worldly status, and he looked forward to offering whatever guidance might be helpful. The next morning arrived with clear skies and the sound of temple bells calling the community to meditation. Bankei waited in his designated meeting room as the appointed time approached, but instead of the Baron himself, the same well-dressed gentleman appeared again, this time with obvious embarrassment written across his features. "Master," the man began, his voice heavy with apology, "I bring regrettable news. The Baron was called away on urgent business that could not be delayed, matters of state that demanded his immediate attention. However, he has not forgotten his desire for your teaching. He has asked me to serve as his representative, to receive your instruction on his behalf, and carry your wisdom back to him faithfully." The gentleman paused, clearly hoping this arrangement would prove acceptable. The Baron's specific question concerns the nature of mind itself. He wishes to understand what is the true nature of consciousness and how can one realize it directly. If you would share your teaching on this matter, I promise to convey every word exactly as you speak it. Bankei listened to this request with gentle attention, his expression remaining calm and compassionate. When the gentleman finished speaking, the master sat quietly for a moment, as if considering not just the question, but the entire situation, the absent seeker, the well-intentioned messenger, and the profound impossibility of what was being asked. Finally, Bankei spoke with characteristic simplicity and directness. This matter of Zen is difficult to convey even through direct question and answer between teacher and student meeting face to face. It becomes all the more difficult, indeed impossible, to transmit through a messenger, no matter how sincere or capable that messenger might be. Having delivered this response, the master said nothing more. He simply sat in silence, embodying the very teaching he had just articulated. The gentleman waited, perhaps expecting elaboration or alternative suggestions, but none came. Eventually finding himself speechless and somewhat confused, the gentleman bowed politely and withdrew from the temple. The Buddha once said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." This profound truth reveals itself in Bankai's gentle but firm refusal to reduce Zen wisdom to a message that could be carried by proxy. Spiritual awakening cannot be transmitted secondhand because it is not information but transformation. Why do we often approach spiritual learning as if it were academic knowledge that can be collected and conveyed through intermediaries? Zen Buddhism teaches that awakening is not a concept to be understood but a reality to be directly experienced. Like the taste of water to someone who is thirsty, it cannot be adequately described. It must be experienced firsthand. The Baron's question about the nature of consciousness reveals our typical approach to spiritual inquiry. We want to understand awareness intellectually, to grasp it conceptually, to possess it as knowledge. But consciousness cannot be made into an object of study because it is the very subject doing the studying. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. The seeing itself is what you are trying to see. Consider how often throughout your day you might approach spiritual wisdom as information to be collected rather than truth to be embodied. We read books about meditation instead of meditating. We study descriptions of enlightenment. Rather than investigating the texture of our present experience, we often seek intellectual answers regarding the nature of mind instead of directly examining the very awareness we call mind in this moment. Zen Master Dogen's profound teaching, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self," articulates this core paradox. This paradox cuts right to the heart of why authentic spiritual transmission necessitates direct, first-hand engagement. The very self that desires to grasp Buddhism intellectually is the egoic construction that must ultimately be dissolved or seen through. This realization arises not from accumulating doctrinal knowledge, but from the intimate and unflinching investigation of immediate experience. The messenger figure in the preceding story symbolizes our inherent human tendency to approach awakening in an indirect, roundabout fashion. We prefer to study consciousness from a safe, theoretical distance, clinging to the illusion that we are separate observers examining an external object called awareness. Yet, awareness is not something we possess. It is what we fundamentally are. Because we are expressions of awareness, it can never be possessed, fully understood, or transmitted as a commodity. Bankai's silence following his brief explanation was itself a profound teaching. In Zen tradition, silence frequently conveys truths that language cannot touch. The spaces between thoughts, the pause between breaths, the underlying awareness from which all experiences arise. These subtle realities defy linguistic capture, but they can be directly recognized the moment we cease striving to grasp them conceptually. This perspective does not suggest that spiritual teaching is futile or that teachers are unnecessary. On the contrary, authentic teaching serves to skillfully guide students toward their own immediate, direct experience, moving beyond second-hand descriptions of someone else's realization. The essential role of the teacher is not to deliver enlightenment like a package, but to cultivate the precise conditions where students might finally recognize the boundless nature they already embody. Tonight, as you sit experiencing the simple, undeniable fact of being conscious, aware of these words, aware of your body, aware of the inner space in which thoughts and sensations manifest, can you investigate this awareness directly bypassing the need for conceptual frameworks? Can you simply be present to your experience instead of attempting to filter or understand it through another person's descriptions or labels? As the Buddha wisely instructed, work out your own salvation with diligence. The profound path to genuine freedom is not one that can be walked by proxy. It demands your own effort, your own breath, and your own unwavering willingness to look directly at the reality you have always been, but perhaps have never clearly perceived. Let us now transition to a tale concerning a young monk who mistakenly concluded that he had failed completely in his spiritual journey. This is the story of the Golden Wake. At a peaceful monastery perched above a serene mountain lake, a young student sat utterly dejected on the temple steps just as the sun commenced its fiery descent toward the water. His posture, shoulders sagged and heavy, was weighted with disappointment, and his eyes mirrored the profound sadness settling in his heart. For many months, he had wrestled futilely with his studies, finding himself unable to grasp the profound Zen teachings that seemed to flow so effortlessly to his fellow monks. "The boat is coming to take me home because I have failed in my studies here at the monastery," he confessed to his teacher, who had quietly approached and settled down beside him. "What explanation can I possibly offer my family? They sent me here filled with such earnest hope, convinced I would return as a learned monk capable of guiding others along the path." The old teacher's gaze was fixed upon the lake, where a small wooden boat was making a deliberate, slow passage across the undisturbed water. The setting sun bathed the entire scene in brilliant shades of gold and amber. "Tell them you did your best," the teacher answered gently, his voice resonating with the quiet wisdom accumulated over many years. "And know that doing your best is truly as much as anyone can ever do. But my aspiration was to become a famous monk, someone who could instruct others." The boy lamented, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I dreamed of presiding over meditation halls, of having disciples eagerly seek my counsel, of generating a genuine impact in the world." "You can still do all those things," the teacher stated simply. "How?" asked the distraught boy, looking at his teacher with genuine confusion. "I couldn't even manage to memorize the basic sutras. I regularly fell asleep during seated meditation. I feel I failed at everything that defines a monk's life." The teacher smiled knowingly and directed the boy's attention toward the water. "Live from your heart, I will demonstrate this to you. Do you see that boat progressing across the lake with the sun setting immediately behind it?" "Yes," the boy replied, tracking his teacher's gaze. "Do you observe its wake spreading out across the still surface of the lake? Notice how the boat itself appears to form the apex of a luminous, golden triangle as the wake fans out dramatically from its bow." The boy squinted hard, struggling to discern the precise image the teacher was describing. "Sort of," the teacher prompted patiently. "That boat is an image of you. As you depart the monastery, the lake represents the canvas of your life. The wake, that spreading pattern behind it, is the inevitable effect you will have on the world. Each initial ripple triggers another, which in turn triggers still another. By diligently striving to live the wisest and most loving life possible, you inherently teach the path of love to everyone you encounter, simply through the authenticity of your being. A few of these people will inevitably pass on your good example to others. Thus, this expanding golden wake of good works begets further good works. And perhaps most importantly, observe closely how each ripple catches the setting sun and beautifully reflects its light back toward the heavens." The boy watched with a sense of wonder as the humble boat continued its journey. The wake truly did form an ever-widening triangle of luminescence on the water's surface. Each tiny wave skillfully captured the golden sunlight and refracted it back toward the sky in countless, sparkling points of light. "Would you consider coming home with me just to explain all of this to my father?" asked the boy, a nascent hope starting to flicker in his voice. The enduring wisdom of the Buddha reminds us, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. The deeper spiritual teaching embedded in this story reveals that profound influence spreads not through performing grand, highly visible gestures or accumulating flawless knowledge, but through the quiet, simple authenticity of a heart that is sincerely committed to goodness. Why do we mistakenly believe that only formal credentials, prestigious titles, or publicly recognized achievements truly qualify us to generate a meaningful impact? Zen Buddhism consistently highlights our societal attachment to external validation and demonstrates our fundamental misunderstanding of how genuine wisdom actually transmits between individuals. We commonly assume that effective teaching requires a podium, a formal title, or a printed certificate, when, in reality, the most profound and lasting lessons are always shared through the silent quality of our presence and the unshakable integrity of our actions. Reflect for a moment on how often during your typical day you encounter individuals who profoundly touch your life, not through their professional expertise, but through their simple kindness, their patience, or their innate human warmth. The grocery store clerk who offers a greeting with genuine care. The stranger who cheerfully provides helpful directions. The friend who listens deeply without offering judgment. These quiet contributors create ripples of positive influence that extend far beyond their conscious awareness. In Zen practice, we actively cultivate what might be termed unconscious teaching, the natural, effortless transmission that occurs when our external actions are truly aligned with our deepest internal values. Much like the boat traversing the lake, we may not always perceive the wake we create, but it spreads inevitably behind us, touching distant shores and lives we never knew existed. The Buddha taught, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. Each moment of authentic living spontaneously becomes a teaching. Each simple act of compassion generates widespread ripples. Each choice to respond from a place of wisdom rather than immediate reactivity sends light reflecting back toward the source. Tonight, as you pause to reflect on your own unique journey, can you perceive the golden wake you are already diligently creating? Perhaps it is evident in the extra patience you extend to a difficult family member, the quiet encouragement you offer a struggling colleague, or the quality of simple, mindful presence you bring to everyday encounters. The light you are reflecting back may already be illuminating paths for others that you have never even imagined. Let us now turn to a story that explores the deceptive nature of outward appearances and the various masks we adopt in our search for acceptance. This is the tale of the hungry abbot and the generous robe. In the bustling merchant quarter of an ancient Chinese city, a place where wealthy silk traders and established families constructed elaborate homes sheltered behind imposing high walls, there lived a man whose extraordinary prosperity was famous throughout the entire region. His grand mansion featured carved jade doorways, courtyards filled with cages of exotic birds, and a vast staff of servants who meticulously attended to every detail of daily life. This wealthy man took enormous pride in his elevated social position and was highly particular about carefully maintaining his pristine reputation among other prominent citizens. One wet autumn morning, as a steady rain slicked the cobblestone streets, a figure approached the man's ornate front gate. The visitor was a Zen abbot from a secluded mountain monastery, yet he presented himself looking like little more than a common beggar. His simple brown robes were heavily patched and worn thin from years of rugged use. His sandals were cracked and caked with mud from traversing mountain paths, and his wooden begging bowl bore the stains and scratches accumulated from countless meals received through charity. The abbot stood silently at the gate, the rain dripping from his shaven head, and waited with the profound, patient dignity earned through decades of spiritual practice. When the gatekeeper finally condescended to notice him, the man's expression immediately curdled into open disdain. "What do you want, beggar?" the gatekeeper demanded harshly, making no effort to bow or show the slightest respect. "This is the residence of a very important man. We have no scraps to spare for wanderers." "I am traveling and seeking alms," the abbot replied gently. "Perhaps your master would be generous enough to offer a simple meal to a monk." The gatekeeper subjected him to an obvious, contemptuous look, taking in the ragged clothes and worn appearance. Clearly, he decided, this was merely another vagrant attempting to exploit the generosity of his master's household. "Be gone," he commanded, his voice sharp. "My master does not waste valuable food on beggars. Seek your charity elsewhere." The abbot received this harsh rejection without demonstrating any trace of anger or engaging in argument. He simply offered a quiet bow, turned, and walked back out into the persistent rain, his empty bowl tucked placidly beneath his arm. Several hours passed. As the afternoon sun finally managed to pierce the clouds, the same figure returned to the same gate. But now, his presentation was radically transformed. The abbot was now draped in his formal ceremonial robes, rich golden silk intricately embroidered with complex patterns, a magnificent purple sash resting across his shoulders, and prayer beads carefully carved from precious wood. While his bearing remained inherently humble, his outward appearance now spoke unmistakably of high spiritual rank and considerable monastery wealth. This time, when the gatekeeper spotted him approaching, his entire demeanor instantly transformed. "Welcome, honored master," he exclaimed, executing a deep, reverent bow. "Please, please, you must enter. My master will be profoundly pleased to receive such a distinguished visitor." The rich man himself swiftly hurried out to greet the abbot personally, offering elaborate, deferential bows and effusive, flowery words of welcome. "Venerable sir, what an immense honor this is for our otherwise humble household. You must join us for our very finest meal. Please permit us the privilege of serving you." They promptly ushered the abbot into their most elegant dining room, where servants quickly arranged a lavish, sumptuous feast. Delicate preparations of fish, perfectly seasoned vegetables, fragrant rice, and sweet desserts rapidly filled the low table. The rich man positioned himself opposite the abbot, beaming widely with pride at his successful ability to host such an important religious figure. As the first course was graciously served, the abbot performed an action that was utterly unexpected. Instead of reaching for the food, he carefully removed his beautiful ceremonial robe, folding it with meticulous attention. Then, with slow, deliberate precision, he placed the folded robe directly in front of the feast, positioning it as if the garment itself were the honored guest. Standing up with quiet dignity, the abbot spoke clearly enough for everyone present to hear. "This meal is not intended for me. It is intended for the robe." Without uttering another sound, he walked directly out of the house, leaving behind both the magnificent, untouched feast and the rich man's dawning, stunned realization of his own superficial and biased judgment. The Buddha's profound wisdom reminds us, judge not by appearances. A rich heart may be hidden under a poor coat. In this cautionary tale, we discover precisely how our deeply ingrained fixation on external appearances erects formidable barriers to genuine human connection and spiritual insight. Why is it that we rush to judge others based purely on their clothing, status symbols, or outward presentation? Zen Buddhism highlights the conditioned mind's habitual tendency to create rigid categories and hierarchies based solely on surface appearances. This mental shortcut grants us the superficial feeling that we understand people, thereby avoiding the far more challenging work required to perceive their intrinsic nature. The behavior of the rich man's household illustrates a common pattern that we must all recognize within ourselves. How drastically do we alter our treatment of the well-dressed stranger compared to the poorly dressed one? How does the quality of our attention change when someone mentions an impressive job title versus a humble occupation? In what ways does our baseline respect shift when we become aware of someone's wealth or lack thereof? This ancient wisdom powerfully illuminates our collective tendency to project intrinsic worth onto arbitrary external symbols, failing to recognize the inherent, unchanging dignity residing within every single person. The abbot himself remained precisely the same person across both encounters. His wisdom, compassion, and spiritual realization were utterly unchanged by his change of clothing. Yet, the household's reaction to him transformed entirely, based solely on his outer appearance. We are encouraged to look deeply at our own habitual patterns of judgment. Perhaps you catch yourself making immediate assumptions about people driving expensive cars versus old vehicles, those wearing designer clothes versus thrift store finds, or those living at prestigious addresses versus modest neighborhoods. Every one of these snap judgments exposes how thoroughly we have been conditioned to equate external presentation with internal worth. This story drives us toward a fundamental inquiry regarding authenticity. If we receive radically different treatment merely based on how we present ourselves, then which version of us is the real one? Are we the individual running errands in casual clothes, or the one dressed professionally for important meetings? Are we defined by being the one seeking help, or the one offering it? In the discipline of Zen practice, we diligently cultivate what is termed the original face, the authentic self that exists beneath all temporary roles, costumes, and presentations. This original face remains constant whether we are clad in patched rags or magnificent ceremonial robes. Regardless of whether others treat us with reverence or dismissal, the Zen masters taught, "Your original face is not born and does not die." This profound teaching invites us to recognize that our essential nature, our capacity for pure awareness, unconditional love, and innate wisdom, remains utterly constant, irrespective of how others perceive us or the ways in which we choose to present ourselves to the external world. The abbot's unforgettable lesson was delivered not only for the rich man, but equally for all of us who encounter his story. By intentionally feeding the robe instead of consuming the meal himself, he brilliantly exposed how often we interact solely with people's carefully constructed personas rather than engaging with their underlying essence. We instinctively honor the title, the clothing, and the symbols of status while completely overlooking the actual human being present right before us. Consider how dramatically this deep insight might transform your everyday interactions. The server attending your restaurant table, the clerk at the corner store, the person simply asking for directions. Each one carries the same intrinsic, essential dignity as the most honored guest. The genuine challenge lies in seeing past the uniforms, the immediate circumstances, and the temporary social roles to perceive the original face hidden beneath. This practice does not require us to disregard practical realities or social conventions, but rather to hold them much more lightly. We can respectfully acknowledge someone's professional role while simultaneously remembering their fundamental, shared humanity. We can dress appropriately for various occasions while knowing with certainty that our personal worth does not, and never will, depend on our wardrobe. Tonight, as you contemplate the various roles and presentations you inhabit throughout the course of a day, can you sense the unchanging awareness that silently witnesses all these temporary costumes? Can you feel the presence of the original face that remains constant regardless of whether others perceive you as important or invisible? The Buddha taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." The abbot's silent, powerful gesture spoke more profoundly than any lengthy sermon on equality and compassion could ever achieve. By deliberately walking away from the feast that was prepared solely for his appearance rather than his essence, he offered a teaching that continues to resonate powerfully across centuries. Let us now turn to a tale exploring the necessary courage required to trust life's constant current. This is the story of the Crystal River. Deep within a great crystal river, where the water flowed with the clarity of mountain air, there lived an entire village comprised of small, aquatic creatures. The river's steady current moved above them like a vast, gentle breath, carrying the accumulated wisdom of countless springs and distant seas. Young and old, the successful and the struggling, all established their homes along the shifting sandy bottom. Every single creature maintained a tight, desperate grasp on stones, branches, and roots. For countless generations, this relentless clinging had been codified as their sole method of survival. From the moment of birth, every creature was taught to wrap their delicate appendages tightly around river rocks and submerged pieces of fallen wood. Hold on tightly, the elders would constantly warn them. The current is treacherous. It will surely sweep you away to unknown, terrifying places. Safety is found only in staying exactly where you are. But one small creature, unique among his peers, began to grow profoundly weary of this endless, exhausting grasping. Day after day, he observed the current flowing above his head, noting how it moved with such unwavering purpose and natural grace. While his neighbors habitually complained about the sheer effort required simply to maintain their grip, he found himself captivated, wondering what it would truly feel like to fully trust that powerful, flowing water. "I am tired of this endless clinging," he announced one morning. "Although I cannot visualize its ultimate destination, I trust that the current itself knows precisely where it is going. I shall now release my hold and allow it to carry me where it chooses, for I genuinely fear that if I continue clinging, I shall surely die of profound boredom before I ever get the chance to truly live." The other creatures gasped collectively in horror. "Fool!" they shrieked. "Let go, and that current will tumble you mercilessly across the sharp rocks below. You will be battered and broken, dying far more quickly and brutally than any boredom could kill you." But the small creature had made a resolute decision. Taking one final, lingering look at his terrified neighbors, he deliberately released his grasp on the familiar, hard stone. Immediately, the current seized him forcefully, and just as his neighbors had grimly predicted, he was brutally tumbled and tossed across the rocky river bottom. His small body repeatedly struck stone after stone, each impact delivering a sharp pain he had never known while clinging safely. Yet something truly remarkable began to unfold. As the creature persisted in surrendering to the current's immense power, resolutely refusing to grasp for new anchors despite the lingering pain, the water began, slowly and gently, to lift him higher, away from the dangerous bottom. The violent tumbling ceased. The abrasive rocks could no longer reach him. He now flowed naturally with the current itself, no longer resisting its direction, but instead becoming wholly integrated with its movement. As he traveled swiftly downstream, creatures in distant parts of the river witnessed a phenomenon they had never conceived of. Here was one of their own kind, yet he appeared to be effortlessly flying through the water, moving with the elegant, potent power of the current itself. "Behold, a miracle!" they cried out. "A creature just like us, yet he soars. Surely he is the Messiah, sent to save us all." The flowing creature heard their cries of alarm and felt immense compassion for their deep misunderstanding. "I am no more a Messiah than any one of you," he called back gently. "The river inherently delights in lifting all of us to freedom, if only we summon the courage to truly let go. Our true work is not found in desperately clinging to the bottom, but in embracing this majestic voyage, this grand adventure of flow and radical trust." But the other creatures simply cried louder, shouting, "Savior! Savior!" Even as they spoke these words, they unconsciously tightened their grips even harder on their respective rocks and roots. They watched until the creature disappeared around a distant bend, then immediately began weaving elaborate legends about the miraculous savior who had briefly graced their fearful village. The core wisdom of the Buddha reminds us, "You only lose what you cling to." This ancient dictum illuminates the profound, agonizing paradox residing at the heart of human experience. We dedicate our lives to grasping for security and exerting control, operating under the assumption that our fundamental safety relies entirely on holding tight to familiar, known circumstances. Yet, in this very act of grasping, we inevitably create the exact suffering we are trying desperately to avoid. Why do we cling so desperately when the natural current of life offers to effortlessly carry us toward vast, unknown adventures? Zen Buddhism reveals that from early childhood, we are conditioned to believe that the known path is safe and the unknown is inherently dangerous. This deep-seated conditioning evolves into a significant spiritual obstacle when it actively prevents necessary growth beyond familiar, self-imposed limitations. Furthermore, we suffer deeply from the illusion of control, the mistaken belief that by tightly grasping circumstances, relationships, and even our own identities, we can halt the natural, unstoppable flow of change. This futile resistance generates enormous internal tension because it places us in direct, exhausting opposition to the fundamental nature of reality itself. Life is characterized by constant, ceaseless movement. When we attempt to resist this fundamental truth, we inevitably exhaust ourselves fighting massive currents that are infinitely more powerful than our individual will. Consider now the specific areas of your life where you notice yourself fiercely clinging. Perhaps it is a relationship that has long outgrown its original configuration, a career path that no longer provides genuine joy, or a limiting image of yourself that now severely constrains your potential growth. The powerful current of change will continue to flow whether we choose to resist it or not. Our only real choice lies in deciding whether to exhaust our energy in futile opposition or to consciously surrender and discover the unexpected grace available in that release. As the Buddha said, "Nothing is permanent except change." Water instinctively does not fight the mountainside. Instead, it effortlessly finds the natural pathway downward. When we learn to move fluidly with the current of life rather than desperately against it, we unlock an effortless effectiveness and profound peace that rigid resistance can never achieve. Tonight, as you allow yourself to rest quietly in this moment's stillness, what might you truly be ready to release? Perhaps it is a persistent worry concerning tomorrow's challenges, a stubborn resentment stemming from yesterday's disappointments, or a limiting way of defining yourself that has simply grown too small. Can you gently feel into the vital current of this moment's aliveness and dare to trust its inherent direction? As the Buddha beautifully taught, let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Relax right now and rest. In this profound act of trust, we finally discover that the very current we once feared would utterly destroy us is actually the immense, compassionate force designed to carry us home to our true, unbound nature. Now let us explore a compelling story concerning the transformative power of belief and the destiny we fundamentally create through faith itself. This is the tale of the general and the coin that revealed truth. A Japanese general found himself confronting an utterly impossible military situation. His army was dramatically outnumbered by the enemy forces. The challenging terrain naturally favored his opponents, and by every conventional measure of military strategy, the imminent battle was predestined to result in a devastating defeat. Yet, something deep within the general remained fiercely convinced that victory was still attainable. Perhaps it was sharp intuition, or perhaps it was sheer, desperate hope, but he felt absolutely certain that his cause was just and that his troops, though fewer in number, possessed an indomitable fighting spirit capable of overcoming the heavy odds. The critical issue, however, lay with his soldiers. They were fully capable of counting their enemies just as well as he was, and they had seen the massive opposing force arrayed against them. Fear was rippling through their ranks like a highly infectious contagion. Doubt clouded every face, Whispered conversations filled with deep pessimism spread throughout the camp, and the general acutely sensed that their collective morale was rapidly crumbling before the first engagement had even commenced. He understood completely that an army convinced of its own defeat would, by definition, be defeated. Regardless of technical skill, superior weaponry, or even numerical advantage, these external factors meant nothing when the soldiers had already surrendered in their hearts. Conversely, an army that genuinely believed in its victory could achieve seemingly impossible feats through the sheer, focused force of that conviction. On the decisive morning of the battle, as the troops marched toward their uncertain destiny, the general purposefully led them to a small, isolated religious shrine that stood beside the road, a sacred place where countless warriors had paused over the centuries to offer prayers before marching toward an unknown fate. The general drew his men close around him, leading them in an earnest, heartfelt prayer, imploring divine blessing and protection for the impending engagement. When the solemn prayers concluded, the general reached into his pocket and produced a simple, worn coin. He held it high above his head so that every soldier could clearly see the object of their destiny. "My brothers," he called out, his voice echoing across the tightly assembled ranks, "we have sought the favor of heaven, and now we shall allow heaven itself to reveal our destiny. I will toss this coin into the air. If it lands heads, we are fated to achieve victory in this battle. If it lands tails, we are destined to suffer defeat. Let us discover the decree of the gods." The soldiers pushed inward, their breathing held shallow by overwhelming anticipation. This single critical moment, this solitary flip of metal spinning through the crisp morning air, seemed to hold the weight of their entire world. The general flung the coin high, and every eye tracked its precise arc as it ascended, hung suspended for a transcendent instant against the sky, and then began its rapid descent back toward the earth. The coin landed and settled quietly in the dust. It was heads. A resounding cheer erupted from the assembled troops, a sound that likely carried for miles across the landscape. Soldiers who had been grim and paralyzed by fear just moments before now laughed with pure joy and embraced one another with a powerful, renewed confidence. The gods had undeniably spoken. Victory was assured. Their sacred cause was blessed by heaven itself. Fueled by this divine certainty, the soldiers engaged their enemies with such fierce determination and coordinated power that they achieved precisely the outcome the coin had foretold. Against incredible odds, they secured a decisive victory, completely routing forces significantly larger than their own and achieving a triumph that would be celebrated and remembered for generations. After the battle, as the general walked among his celebrating troops, his chief lieutenant approached him, wonder shining in his eyes. "General," the lieutenant said, "what an incredible event. The coin truly revealed our destiny, exactly as you predicted it would. Surely, no human power can alter what heaven has decreed." "You are absolutely right," the general replied with a knowing, gentle smile. He reached into his pocket once more and withdrew the coin, holding it so that his lieutenant could examine it closely. "No one can change destiny." The lieutenant looked at the coin and gasped. Both sides showed heads. The Buddha once taught, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think we become." Here we discover the profound, practical truth that destiny is not merely something that happens to us, but rather something we actively create through the sheer power of our own fundamental beliefs and deeply held expectations. Why do we so readily assume that fate exists beyond our sphere of influence when our own minds play such a crucial, fundamental role in shaping what ultimately unfolds? Zen Buddhism specifically teaches that while we cannot fully control all external circumstances, we possess tremendous, undeniable power over the internal conditions that determine how we respond to whatever challenges or opportunities arise. The general understood something profound about human psychology and the very nature of reality itself. He knew that his soldiers' unwavering belief in their victory was far more vital than their numerical disadvantage. He recognized that genuine confidence, unwavering determination, and a fierce fighting spirit could easily overcome superior numbers when those inner qualities were genuinely present. But here is the deeper teaching. The general did not simply manipulate his troops through cynical deception. He skillfully created the precise internal conditions that allowed their natural courage and strength to fully emerge. The soldiers possessed the ability to fight brilliantly all along. They simply needed to find the conviction to believe in themselves and the righteousness of their cause. Consider your own intimate relationship with destiny and possibility. How often do you assume that outcomes are entirely predetermined, that success or failure lies completely beyond your influence? The general's two-headed coin metaphorically represents the inherent power we all possess to skillfully tip the scales in favor of positive outcomes, achieved through the quality and intensity of our engagement with life. This does not imply that we can control everything solely through positive thinking, or that merely believing in something automatically makes it true. The soldiers still had to physically fight the battle. They still had to demonstrate actual skill and courage. But their resolute belief in victory created the essential psychological conditions that allowed their very best qualities to fully manifest. In Zen practice, we learn to work skillfully and harmoniously with both determined effort and complete surrender, both focused intention and profound acceptance. We recognize that while we cannot ultimately dictate specific outcomes, we can profoundly influence the energy and attention we consistently bring to any given situation. This quality of focused engagement often determines whether we experience success or failure, regardless of the external circumstances we face. Zen master Hongpa taught, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." The general was wise enough to immediately see that his soldiers' internal thoughts about the battle were far more influential than their thoughts concerning their numerical disadvantage. He worked intentionally with the fundamental reality of psychology rather than futilely fighting against it. Look deeply at the various challenges and opportunities present in your own life. Where might you currently be carrying a tails mentality? Are you assuming defeat before you have fully engaged, focusing relentlessly on obstacles rather than possibilities, or letting paralyzing fear determine your level of effort? And where might you need to create your own two-headed coin, a conscious practice or enduring perspective that consistently orients you toward positive, skillful engagement regardless of surrounding circumstances? The Buddha taught, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." This is not magical thinking. It is the profound recognition of the creative power of consciousness itself. When we approach situations with genuine confidence, clarity, and unwavering commitment, we often discover latent capabilities we never knew we possessed. Tonight, as you contemplate the battles you are facing and the outcomes you are hoping for, can you find your own version of the general's profound wisdom? Can you create internal conditions that support your highest possibilities rather than feeding your deepest fears? Can you recognize that while you cannot fully control destiny, you have profound influence over the beliefs and attitudes that fundamentally shape how destiny unfolds through you? Buddha's wisdom reminds us, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. The general's confidence acted as that single flame, lighting the fire of belief in every soldier's heart. Sometimes the most powerful and transformative thing we can do is create the conditions that allow others, and ourselves, to finally discover the immense strength that was inherent within us all along. As our time together draws to a quiet close, take a moment now to simply notice the stillness that has effortlessly found you. Can you feel how this deep, pervasive calm is not something you had to build or acquire, but rather something you have simply allowed to surface. This tranquility you feel is your own inherent nature, a quiet, deep reservoir that is always there, waiting just beneath the surface layer of your thoughts. The Buddha once offered this gentle guidance. In the end, only three things truly matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. Reflect on this deep wisdom now. Each story we explored tonight was a quiet, necessary lesson in the art of letting go, releasing the tight grip of yesterday's regrets, tomorrow's consuming anxieties, and the mind's endless, unnecessary chatter. This understanding has now been planted within you, a vital seed of awareness that will continue to grow long after these words have faded. This entire experience is not about achieving a perfect state of mind, but rather about developing a new, compassionate relationship with your own experience. Even if thoughts return, even if the world feels loud again tomorrow, remember the feeling you have right now. The lessons from these ancient masters have shown you a dependable path back to this quiet center, a way of being that is always accessible. The profound peace you have touched is not a fleeting visitor. It is a permanent resident of your own awareness. As you prepare for deep and restorative sleep, know that the true teaching was not found in the stories themselves, but in the quiet, healing space they opened within you. It is in this inner stillness that ultimate clarity is found, and where the body and mind can truly begin to heal. Carry this feeling of gentle release with you as you drift off. Let it be the strong foundation for your rest and the quiet, steady strength that greets you in the morning. Thank you for joining us on this journey at Zen Stories Sleep. Sleep well.